EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. Just 3 or 4 days removed from the NFL draft. Still breaking down who the Eagles brought in, the new players, what the new makeup of the team will look like here. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Wednesday morning, brother?
Draft behind us, off-season work in front of us, starting to pick up. Jordan Davis decision got to be done quickly by the end of the week. So,
deadline on that is tomorrow, correct? Not Friday, right?
Correct, tomorrow.
Yeah, so we should hear on that by tomorrow with Jordan Davis. We are going to talk a little NFL draft. We are going to talk a little defensive line this morning. Speaking of Jordan Davis, John, I do want to ask, did anything come out on the rookie camp or the dates on any of that stuff? Any idea when that next offseason work is?
It's not official. Not going to be this weekend, obviously, at this late stage, although you never know with the Eagles. So it'll be next weekend, generally Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But sometimes in the past, the Eagles have only done one day. So I shouldn't say that. Other teams, it's a little bit longer. So until we know, we don't know. But it'll be next week either way.
Looking forward to seeing that. Looking forward to seeing the rookies out there. Obviously, some of them won't be out there. I think it's Jahad Campbell, right? Is he the only one who probably won't be in pads? Is everybody else good to go?
Well, nobody will be in pads. There's no
not pads, but in athletic mode.
As far as I know, yeah. But we'll see on that. There could be injuries that we don't know about. Guys can get hurt in training, and all of a sudden show up and they're not ready to go with a hamstring or something less serious. But as far as, coming off surgery, he's the only one with an obvious issue, I would say.
Johnny Mac, I want to talk defensive line here on this morning. I want to welcome everybody in. Thank you all for being here. Hit that like button. All right, we appreciate everybody for being here this morning. We got a great show planned today. We got Mike Gill and Lee Goutton, our usual Wednesday suspects. So looking forward to talking to both of those guys here, see what they thought of the Eagles' haul in the NFL draft. John, I want to start with the defensive line. All right, because a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the edge rushing room, you said if they go into the season and this is their rotation, something bad happened. All right. Now, does Jahad Campbell address that? Do you think there's more coming there? How do you feel right now overall about the depth, about the rotation, and about the players that the Eagles have on the defensive line post-NFL draft?
I want people to turn on their listening devices because it bothers me when people, go in a different direction from what I actually say. The end game for Jahad Campbell is to be a big part of the pass rushing package. The end game, the goal. He's got a torn labrum. Had surgery in March. Has been playing off-ball linebacker at Alabama. If you go back to last year as Cooper DeJean, who was an outside corner at Iowa. That's how the Eagles scouted him. That's how the scouting department, the personnel department envisioned him. And obviously the Eagles still had Darius Slay, Quinyon Mitchell. So to get him on the field, he had to play in the slot. Was not familiar. Didn't play a lot in the slot. Hurt his hamstring before training camp. Did not play the first 4 weeks. Only to the bye week, which was early last year. Did he ramp up and get on the field and turn into the Cooper DeJean that everyone knows and loves now? Day one, no, it's not any solution. This guy's very raw as a pass rusher. He's got to work on technique. He's got to do all these things. He's got to ramp up to be that. But if you see Howie Roseman's comments, Alec Hallaby on Eagles.com, the assistant GM, obviously in lockstep. Everybody can go read it over there. It's clear what they want the goal to be. Someone in the chat yesterday said, Oh, McMullen really doesn't want him to play off-ball linebacker. I don't give a shit where he plays. I'm trying to give you an information of what they envision the player being. I don't care where he plays. Doesn't impact me at all. When they drafted him, I was like everybody else. I said, oh my God, they drafted a linebacker in the first round. I was like everybody else. Then I listened to Howie and his projection of the player. And again, it's a projection. That doesn't mean day one of off-season work, which is not even going to be healthy. It doesn't mean day one of training camp, which he's probably not going to be healthy.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't mean day one of the regular season. It might be week 5 like Cooper. That was a 3-week injury, and it took him to 5th week. And maybe the second half of the season. It may be the second year of his career. But that's the projection of the player. And again, from Howie Roseman and Alec Hallaby, not from me. Sorry, I'm glad you went there because I wanted at some point.
Well, no, I appreciate you clarifying it because obviously I think most of the people here understand what you're saying. But again, we've talked about how there's a little bit of a back and forth on understanding of what Jahad Campbell is going to be. And yesterday, Brandon Lee Goutton, who we're going to have on later today, tweeted out that Fran Duffy, the guy who used to work with the Eagles, he's over at PHLY, does a great job for them. He put out, my understanding from conversations I've had in the last few days is that it's going to be off-ball linebacker first, and then we'll see what happens from there. Now, people will say that's different from what you're saying, but it's actually very consistent with what you're saying, and that the end goal is to get him to the edge. Now, back to my original question there, John. Do you think they're done adding then at the edge? Do you think there's another move to come? Is there another domino to fall on this defensive line?
Well, I think it's dependent on off-season work, maybe even into training camp. Whereas I say, everybody loves their draft class. You see it all the time. One of my pet peeves about draft grades is not only that they're silly. What is the import? What is the importance of a draft grade if everybody gets an A to a B? Okay.
Right.
They're not all going to be Bs because
not all the players are going to hit, regardless of where people had them on their value chart.
So if you're going to do those grades, which are silly to begin with, at least, go out on a limb and say, all right, these guys suck. They didn't do a good job. Or these guys did a great job. Everybody getting an A or B, and there's certain draft guys. And like I said, personnel people and coaches, especially in the modern era, are relentlessly positive. I mean, they're taught to be that way. So they don't, whenever you see these goofy social media accounts about unnamed scouts ripping players, they don't do that. They don't talk that way. They'll talk about deficiencies, but they'll talk much more about what the player can do than what he can't do. Is basically how they're taught.
Right.
And, it's the coach's job to mask those deficiencies and accentuate the positives as much as possible. Because there's no, from Abdul Carter on down, there's no perfect defensive player. From guys who've done it at the NFL level, Hall of Fame level players like Aaron Donald's the best defensive player of this generation. Doesn't mean he was perfect. Nobody's perfect. So everybody has a chance, to improve. So, and the chat, old school guys would talk that way. Bill Parcells, when he calls Terrell Owens she or something like that, there was more of that hard-nosed, really critical in the old school, but I think it's changed a lot. You have to evolve with society, and that's where we are as a society. People, especially younger people, I think, would have a more difficult time dealing with the Bill Parcells is how I would describe it. So you get more Nick Sirianni types who are relentlessly positive. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the
nature of the beast. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but you get this around the NFL every year. And guys are like, oh, we got this guy in the draft. We got this guy in the draft. And then they get him on the field and they go, oh, shit. And whether it's, this guy's not ready, this guy's not ready. Not even that. Again, it takes time to develop players normally. Little spoiled from that standpoint last year with Quignon and Cooper. But even Cooper, people forget that first 4 weeks he didn't play, only to the bye week. And I thought Vic waited a little bit too long on that, but it didn't hurt him. That's for sure. So it generally takes some time, but so they'll give Aziz Ojulari and Josh Uche and more importantly, Jalix Hunt opportunities. But, it becomes clear, and Vic's pretty good at this, as he's proven, that that's not enough. And I think it will become clear. Then they got to go a different direction. Probably get more of a veteran stopgap at this stage. You're not getting Myles Garrett,
Right.
He's not de-signing and re-signing. They're not in a position to get Trey Hendrickson. Although, if you get desperate enough, your mentality, your sentiment changes. And if they show up and they start working and Vic goes, yeah, this ain't going to work, that shifts the scales a little bit.
So as it stands right now,
I would not be comfortable with it.
Who do you think would be the starters on that defensive line right now? If we started the season today, which we don't, we got plenty of time. Who would be the starters in your opinion on that defensive line? Front seven. Give me the front seven.
Well, front seven, odd front. So, the run stopping front, for lack of a better term, the 50 front, whatever you want to call them. Jordan Davis is your nose tackle. The two poor eyes are Jalen Carter and Moro Ajomo. And the edge rushers would be Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt. That's where they will default, I'm pretty sure, because they like to give the in-house, the guy who's been here, the first rep, whatever. Like that's meaningful.
I think Jalix is going to be the best of the three, to be honest with you.
Well, he'll get the first rep, because he did enough to get. Now, I'm not saying a couple years ago we always bring it, Steve Nelson. Well, they had nobody with any upside at cornerback. So he signed like 2 days before camp. First defensive rep of camp, it was Steve Nelson, basically for the entire season. But they had no obvious in-house potential starting. They were talking about starting Zach McPherson, an outside cornerback, as a 4th-round pick. That's how that's the kind of lack of depth they had. So, everything is fluid, but Jalix did enough last year. Well, who'll get the first sort of opportunity, if you want to call it that? Now, again, the first rep in training camp, which is, what you were talking about.
Andre Dillard got the first rep over
Andre Dillard got the first step over. How many, all we do this show, we do football 24/7 training camp tonight, whatever we call it, every day during training camp. Devin White, 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 Devin White. And everybody loses their mind at the end, even though I told them it ended up being Nakobe Dean. And, Vic, I remember Vic very vividly, asked the question, what's going on here? Why did Devin get all these reps? And all the fans are like, well, he gets all the reps. That's not what training camp's about. In the case of Nakobe Dean, they were trying to A, see if he could stay healthy. B, yes, light a little bit of a fire under his butt, so to speak. And a number of different things to try to massage the player to get to his potential, which ultimately he reached. I would say he overachieved to where people expected him to play after his first 2 seasons by a pretty wide margin. But I vividly remember Vic being asked the question when the change was made, and he basically said, yeah, it wasn't close. That blows people's minds.
Right.
Because, training camp is not about, statistics. No offense to Elliott. Not about quarterback statistic. It's not about rep counting. It's about getting to where you want to be as a coaching staff. Doug Peterson used to have 10-10-10 practices where the practices are essentially, not walk through speed, but a little bit more. But there's a 10-minute period where you're working on offense and the defense is just out there to give the offense a look. And then it goes to defense, then it goes to special teams. And the Eagles had to print out a thing and give it to the members of the media and say, look, this is a 10-10-10 practice, because they didn't want, so-and-so threw a touchdown pass and the corner looked terrible. It's not supposed to be. It's giving them a look to execute the play. So there's a lot of misconception about training camp practices. And believe me, I've been to training camp practices for almost 30 years. When I first started doing it, I had no idea about this shit. Like everybody else. There's different goals. And even today, I don't know everything they're trying to accomplish, everything they're trying to do.
Right.
But if you evaluate it like a game, you're going to get a lot of shit wrong.
Exactly. And when you say the goal of training camp, is for the coaches to be prepped, what are some of the
Coaches
things
to
that
get the players prepped?
Players prepped, but is it also knowing their personnel, knowing what each player can do? In this case, they have a lot of new players, obviously. Like Vic Fangio can turn on the Ojulari tape until he gets him in practice. Does he really know what he has in that player? Is that a part of it as well?
Yeah, Jim Swartz gave me the best. That off season is for teaching. Training camp is evaluation, and regular season is preparation for the next opponent. That's all you do in the regular season. Week 1's about the week 1 opponent. Week 2 is about the week 2 opponent. So you have teaching, evaluation, and some of the teaching bleeds into the first 2 weeks of training camp. Then evaluation, then preparation. That's what the calendar looks like. And the entire goal is, every coach goes through it with every player, because you think you got everything you wanted in the draft or free agency. Not certain teams, there's certain bad teams, but there's a lot of hype about Makuba and Robinson and even some of the lesser draft picks. And you get them into even an OTA environment, certainly in training camp, and you go, all right, he's not ready. And then you got to shift gears. It happens all over the league to every team. And edge is still a position where the Eagles might have to address with a more accomplished player at some point, unless they hit gold on Azeez Ojulari or Josh Uche, which is possible.
If I forced you to say yes or no, they will add an edge at this point, and obviously you reserve the right to change it. What you just explained will determine whether they do it or not. Do you think right now you believe they will add another edge?
Yeah, I think they're going to have to.
I agree. We'll see what ends up happening there. We got Mike Gill in the green room. Looking forward to talking to Mike Gill, and a welcome and thank everybody again for being here this morning. Don't forget to hit that like button. All right. A great NFL draft for the Eagles. We had 2 great guests on yesterday. All right. 2 great guests coming up for you guys today. Let's get to Mike Gill joining us here on Birds 365. You can follow him at Mike Gill Show. All right. Go check him out on YouTube at Mike Gill Show over there as well. Mike, welcome to the show, man. How you doing here on this Wednesday morning?
I'm doing well, boys. What's going on?
Doing well, Mike. Basking in the shadow of the draft that is now behind us. You get to talk about it every day with your listeners and the text line, and how do they feel about the Eagles Hall? A lot of optimism I get. Do you get that same optimism?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I think what Roseman has created over the last couple of years is benefit of the doubt. So even if you didn't like picks, it's almost, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt because they've done such a good job.
I think he's earned a lot of that, Mike. I do think he's earned a lot of that, right?
Yeah, and look, they filled a lot of areas where they had, where they had to replenish. The question that we asked, throughout yesterday, is, listen, I saw a poll that Kevin Sheehan from 980 The Team down in Washington ran. I thought it was interesting and kind of the basis of some conversation we had on my show yesterday. And he asked the Washington fans, do they think that they are closer to Philly, further from Philly, or about the same as they were last year after now the draft is now over? And about 53% thinks they're closer to Philadelphia. And I don't think that's outlandish if you look at it of, hey, we're Washington. We had it, Laremy Tunsil. We drafted a right tackle that you're hoping that makes an impact. That's 2 players that should start for them that they did not have last year. You also added Deebo Samuel. The Philadelphia side, you lost Milton Williams. You don't have a definitive replacement for him. You're going to find out if there is a guy at training camp. You lost Josh Sweat. You don't have you guys were just talking about it. You don't have a definitive guy. You're hoping Jalix Hunt, but that's a wild card. You lost Darius Slay. You don't have a definitive answer there. You're going to battle it out at training camp. You lost Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. There's no definitive answer. That's another training camp battle. You have 4 training camp battles that need to be figured out before you say we're a finished product here. Right. Meanwhile, Washington is saying, hey, we have our offense that went to the NFC Championship game. We add Laremy Tunsil. Our first-round pick is going to play on the right side. We think our offensive line's better. Deebo Samuel, I know some people are iffy on him, but it's the best weapon they've had opposite of Terry McLaurin. So if you're in Washington, do you think you've closed the gap on Philadelphia? I won 12 games last year. I feel like if I'm Washington, there's a good reason for me to say we match up way better than we did a year ago.
Fair take. Get me fired up for training camp too, Mike.
Right? Well, listen, we asked the question, like, Vic Fangio all of a sudden has become like Jeff Stoutland. Like, just give him players and they'll just be good all of a sudden. True. And to which I said, no, everybody, I like Vic Fangio did a great job last year, but pump the brakes a little bit. Like, he just was in Miami and that team was a disaster. He got fired from Denver. Like, it wasn't like all these teams were just magically great. He got here and he did an unbelievable job with what he had. But, think about this. We talked about it yesterday because somebody texted into my show about, well, Jaden Daniels might have a sophomore slump. Okay. Well, what if Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean take a step back?
You can't talk like that, Mike.
No,
I'm just saying.
It's a great point. I'm just joking.
Here's another one. Zach Vaughn was an all-pro out of nowhere last year. Is he going to be better? Is he going to be the same? Or is he going to regress a little bit? I have no idea. Those 3 players, you're all just assuming are going to continue to get better. And I hope that they do. I think the only guy on defense right now where you're like, I think I know what I'm getting is Jalen Carter. Other than that, is Nolan Smith going to be better? Is Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean going to take another step forward? What is Reed Blankenship without Chauncey Gardner-Johnson next to him? I watched him play in 2023, and I didn't like what I saw all that much. So can he be the leader in the safety room that he had to be in 2023, and that didn't work out so well? So there's a lot of stuff on defense that I think training camp is going to have to really figure out.
So you got questions on 10 of the 11 starters on D, and I don't think you're unfounded on many of them.
Well, how many of
No.
these guys? I mean, you got two guys who are now going into their second year. If you were to ask me what I think, I like both those guys a lot. I don't expect them to take steps back. So I feel good about – you're asking me personally.
Right. But the possibility does exist, to your point.
We can't just assume that these guys have now established themselves of this is who they are. We've seen a lot of guys kind of flash, and then you're like, what happened to that guy? What happened? The guy was out in the two guys out in Seattle. I mean, they had like the new Legion of Boom out there. What happened to Walton? And like they just all of a sudden like they had really good rookie years, and then they kind of like took a step back a little bit. I don't think that's going to happen with these two guys, but the possibility exists. So to go back to the original question, what do people think? They're given the benefit of the doubt, which they should. They filled a lot of areas. They drafted 5 straight defensive players. You're hoping, in my mind, Campbell, Makuba, that those two guys with Ty Robinson are factors. I don't know if they're first-day starters on the field all the time, but you're hoping at least they're in the rotation right off the bat. But even if they are in the rotation, are they an upgrade over the guy they're replacing? Probably not.
Yeah, I think if you look at it logically, I mean, if you look at what they lost on defense, I'm in Mike's camp here. I mean, up front, you lose 1 starter, 2 starters, Josh Sweat and Milton Williams, and a really significant role player in Brandon Graham. At cornerback, you lose a 6-time Pro Bowl corner in Darius Slay. On the downside of his career, but still played at a high level last year. You lose Isaiah Rodgers, who's great as the 3rd corner. Linebacker, you lose your 3rd linebacker, Warren Burks, who, filled in very well for Nakobe Dean when he got injured. And Nakobe, who knows when he's going to be ready? Who knows when Jahad Campbell's going to be ready? And then at safety, as you pointed out, you trade C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who's just, playmaker, leaves, playmaker, and now you have to replace that. And what at any of those spots have the Eagles improved? I would argue no. That's a lot of spots.
Sight unseen, I would say no. I mean, is Drew Makuba going to come in?
Short term.
Is Drew Makuba going to come in and get 6 interceptions? I find that hard to believe, but hey, I'm hopeful. Is Ty Robinson going to come in and give you outstanding pass rush and play 50% of the snaps? Hopeful. Don't know if I see that right off the bat. Campbell's a wild card. How do they use him? Where do they use him? How many snaps is he getting? Like I talked about this on my show, maybe with you, John, on Monday. He was the 31st pick. Okay. He should have been a top 10 pick. They had him on the board, yada, yada, yada. I'm sure you got similar rhetoric to when Nolan Smith, we had him higher on our board, blah, blah, blah. Nolan Smith was picked 30th. How many snaps did he get as a rookie?
Yeah, I pointed that out.
Minimal. So he made a minimal impact in the same draft position as Campbell did. So I am hopeful, and I like the Campbell pick a lot. I am hopeful that he has a bigger role than a player like Nolan Smith did as a rookie. Nolan Smith had essentially no role as a rookie. He was picked 30th.
Yeah.
Campbell was
By the way, that
31st.
applies to the 2nd-round pick too. John pointed this out to me. The 2nd-round picks who have contributed, Cooper DeJean was 40, Landon Dickerson was in the 30s, even Cam Jurgens was 51. Makuba was 64. The closest one he was drafted to was Tyler Steen, who was 65, the first pick of the 3rd round. And he barely plays in year 3, going into year 3. So
yeah, I mean, and you look at, I think of that group, Campbell, obviously you're hopeful that, he really was a top 10 player and the injuries kind of pushed him back, but that he's healthy and can contribute in play. I'm just going off of Nolan Smith was drafted in the same spot. So if you're saying he's a 1st-round pick, he has to contribute. Nolan Smith was too, and he contributed buckets his first year in this league. 0. He gave you a nothing burger as a rookie. Now, 2nd year, he was better. Maybe Campbell the 1st year, maybe we should, curb our expectations for Campbell. But I'm looking at corner. Mac McWilliams is a guy I like a lot. Now, he's been a slot guy for the most part. Are you going to stick him on the outside and say, hey, go battle with, Adoree Jackson and Kaylee Ringo and get into that competition? Or are they going to use him as, hey, we're going to put this guy in the slot so that we can use Cooper in dime packages on the outside and move this guy in? So he's going to be interesting to see how they use. But you look around, we talked about yesterday on my show, Darius Slay, was he a all-pro? No, but you never had to say, oh, my God, Darius Slay's on the other side. You knew the guy was giving you a professional effort every single week. Are you getting a professional effort every single week and every single quarter from Kaylee Ringo? Or is there big plays going to be happening every now and then where you're like, hey, remember the term X play when Chip Kelly was here? You saw him every week. Like, is Kaylee Ringo or Adoree Jackson ready to be a similar level of contributor that Darius Slay? And we're talking about Darius Slay here. We're not talking about some bozo who just walked out the door. He was pretty darn good last year. And you just take for granted because Quinyon Mitchell was so outstanding.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, all around.
How did I wake up and feel like I'm being the miserable guy today?
Oh, my goodness, Mike. You came in. You're pouring gasoline everywhere, Mike.
You need to take some of the heat off me, so I appreciate it, Mike. No,
I got my coffee. I'm feeling good. I'm outside. It's 80 degrees down the shore.
I think it's, there's a lot of assumptions being made that rookies and very young players are going to replace really good players.
Yeah.
And it generally doesn't work out that way. Might happen, we're talking about 7 positions. I ran them down. 8 really, if you want to add Oren Burks. Maybe it happens with 1 or 2 of them.
By the way, John, you have to add Oren Burks. He started in the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
I mean, he was a huge contributor. And he started basically the entire playoff run for this team. It's akin to, when Jason Peters got hurt and Vaitai had to play left tackle. I mean, he played left tackle essentially the entire second half of the season. Yes, when you lose a player who had that type of impact, that is now something that needs to be accounted for.
So of those 8, 4 would be a grand slam. 2 or 3 would be great. But all 8?
Well, let's even account for this, okay? And I believe this. I'm just saying, look, there's a possibility, right, that Zach Bond, Quinyon Mitchell, and Cooper DeJean maybe aren't as good or better than they were last year. I think we're all just assuming they were awesome as rookies. They got to be better.
That's why, and to your point, I'm glad you brought that up. That's with the assumption that Quinyon plays at the same level, Cooper plays at, Nolan plays at the same level, and that's probably not going to, Zach Bond, that's probably not going to happen. At least 1 or 2 of them are going to.
Let's assume that all of those guys are either as good or take a step forward. Okay, great. Who's replacing Milton Williams' production, Josh Sweat's production, Darius Slay, what he brought to the back end, and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson? That's still 4 key spots that right now you are.
And Josh Sweat. Did we mention Josh?
Josh Sweat, yeah. Williams, Sweat, you can throw Slay in there, and of course, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Those 4 players all need to be replaced. Is the replacement player right now an upgrade over those 4 guys? And that's assuming that Zach Bond, and by the way, are we assuming that Kobe Dean is stepping right back in there and playing at a really high level? That's kind of hard to believe in my mind right now. And by the way, the Eagles drafted not 1, but 2 linebackers. Maybe their messaging is we're a little worried about Nakobe Dean too, because when was the last time the Eagles drafted any linebacker, let alone 2 in the same draft?
All right, Mike, all these possibilities exist, but what's your opinion? Where are they going to fall next year? They're going to be top 5, top 10? I mean, you're right.
You know why? First off, Xander, you know why
Mike, if it's bust case scenario, though, shit, man, we could be like 25. Where do you got the defense this year?
I got asked yesterday, do I think the Eagles will be a top 3 defense? And that's when I kind of was like, all right, let's pump the brakes here, okay? They lost 4 starters on the defensive side of the ball and have a lot of questions. For them to be the number 1 defense last year was truly unbelievable. And 4 of the key guys from that are gone. I can't sit here and tell you now that I see a top 3 defense when I'm replacing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who had 12 interceptions in 2 years here. 12. I don't know who's playing that position. Where are you getting 6 interceptions from that changes the complexion of a game from the group of guys that they're throwing at you right now? Now, John, you were on my show, I think on Thursday last week, last week. And you said if they don't draft a safety, Justin Simmons could be here a couple days later. Well, they did draft a safety. Does that preclude them from saying we're good enough in that room now that we shouldn't add a safety? Or do they still think we might not be good enough in that room? I'm interested to see.
Well, I think it sets it back. I said, they'll look at, and this happens all the time across every team. They'll look at the young players in OTAs, mini camp, even into training camp. And if it becomes obvious, and with Vic, it'll be quicker than most because Vic is good. He'll assess really quickly, is this guy ready? And if the answer is no, then you have, and Howie was he's very consistent. Talent gathering season is not over for the Philadelphia Eagles. And he talks about it all the time. There will be guys signed after the draft. Not a lot, but there could be a body here and there. And then into training camp, he's made big-time trades in the past, CJ being one of them the first time. Ronald Darby during the Super Bowl seasons, another example. If they look at it and say, all right, we're just not good enough here, they'll try to uncover a different rock. And
how long do you have to go before there's a player of that magnitude that just sits out there?
Well, it depends. Like Justin Simmons is, teams were probably waiting to get the compensatory pick aspect out of it. Certainly the Eagles were. But they drafted a safety. So I think the timeline on him falls back. So then it's up to Justin Simmons. Does he want to sit and wait until training camp? Might be injury related to another team where they say, all right, we need a safety. Let's go get Justin Simmons and pay him $7-8 million. Depends. A lot of times it depends on the veteran. How far does he want to take it? And if somebody calls him up today and says, hey, we got a job for you, he might say, I was hoping for the Eagles, but I got to go here.
Gotcha. Well, and to go back to your question, Zander, my opinion would be, I think Quinyon Mitchell is a stud. I think he's going to be as good, if not better. I think he'll only keep improving. Same with Cooper DeJean. I think he is a tremendous asset to have. So I'm not sitting here saying I think. I'm just saying I don't know. Maybe these guys are just
fair. I think the speculations you brought up are fair. I mean, you look at the history of the NFL and the team. Look, I mean, that's how it works.
We have this debate on my show all the time. We have a segment with one of my producers, Nick Earnshaw, throws topics at me, and he thinks I hate the Eagles because I say they should ban the tush push. I say, no, as an Eagles fan, I don't want to see them lose the tush push. I'm saying as an objective football fan, I think it gives the offense an unfair advantage. So if I'm running football, I would probably ban the play. As an Eagles fan, I don't want to see the play go, so I'm not advocating that. So my point is, I'm just trying to look at it from a football landscape, not an Eagles observer. I'm just saying you got two young guys who were a big part of your defense. Do we all anticipate they're going to be better than they were a year ago? That's hard. I mean, it's like for these guys to continue to improve, that's how you become. This is the big step for there. Like, you take a look at Zach Bond. He came out of nowhere and did what he did last year. I would imagine teams are going to watch what he did on film and try to attack him a little differently and do some different things. Do the Eagles adjust the way they use him? Can he just assume I'm coming back and playing the same way I did last year, and that's going to be good enough? Zach Bond is a complete wild card, I have to assume. I mean, this guy's not Mike Singletary in there all of a sudden. I mean,
he might be.
Well, that if he has another good year, fine. Then we
How about
all
Nolan
say,
Smith. What do you think, Nolan Smith?
Nolan Smith's interesting because as a rookie, he did nothing. Last year, he gave you a pretty
half a season, basically.
Right. He gave you a very good back end of the season. So, I've seen guys play back ends of the season. There was a guy named Bobby Hoying. He was pretty good for a half of a season, and then he was horrible. Throw the Bobby Hoying stuff out at you.
Mike, you're stirring this pot today, brother. I love it.
Well,
let's not take so much from small sample sizes. Nolan Smith, by the way, I do think, I asked you guys, I think a couple weeks ago, he had 6.5 sacks last year. What's his ceiling? Is he 10, 12? I mean, you get 6.5 sacks. What do you follow that up with the next year to become an ascending player?
Well, here's another thing, and I talk about it because she brought up Washington.
Now, yeah,
like I'm pretty confident, Mike, that Jaden Daniels is not going to have the same statistical season he had as a rookie, and he might end up being a better player. Like, people can't wrap their heads around that. There's going to be adjustments to what he did last year. It's going to be more. You saw it with CJ Stroud. He might get better as a player, but his numbers will go back. That, to me, could happen with Zach Vaughn. Like, he's not hitting those numbers again. He might be even a better player, but it's just not sustainable. I think that's the part that I think a lot of people can't wrap their heads around. He might even be better from play to play to play to play. He might make less mistakes from play to play to play to play. But to get that many splash plays, that's going to be really, really difficult to replicate.
Now, is Quinyon Mitchell going to become the guy that nobody throws at? And particularly because Kaylee Ringo's playing on the other side. So Mitchell, I have less doubts about. Cooper DeJean, I don't have a lot of doubts about him. I think he's a very talented player and smart player and knows they know how to use him, and they're probably evolving with what they want to do with him. So I personally don't think that those two guys are going to regress. Just saying, it's not a fait accompli that two rookies from last year are now going to be.
Well, and the same thing happens with them. They might get play better, but it may not show up.
Yeah.
On with as many wins or on the stat sheet or the number one defense, but they might get better as players.
Yeah, and you mentioned CJ Stroud as a rookie. He was outstanding last year. I think people would look at him and say, man, he took a step back.
Did he though?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Did he? I mean, the offensive line was a disaster down there. Then he lost Diggs. Then he lost Dell.
I mean, it wasn't as pretty. That's why it wasn't as pretty as year one.
Yeah. So that's kind of the point. As far as Vic goes, I'll push back though on one thing because I'm a big guy, and I do think he'll maximize what he has. The problem is he doesn't have as much as he had last year. That's the problem.
Exactly, and
like people say about
Miami, and they weren't very good.
Well, that's what I'm pushing back. They were damn good until Jalen Phillips and Andrew Van Ginkel got hurt. Then they fell apart. They were a damn good defense, not number one.
Yeah, but to be fair, at this point of the off season last year, you could have said a lot of these same questions. Now, I'm not saying you're wrong that the possibility exists that they're bust this year, but Zach Vaughn, we had no clue. We thought Devin White was going to be the linebacker. N'Kobe Dean had played significant reps. We didn't know.
I'm taking that.
Cooper and Quinyon, Nolan Smith, like a lot of the guys who were a big part of the defense at this time last year, we had questions on them too. So I guess the questions are fair, but it could go either way still, right?
Absolutely. And look, when we entered training camp last year, the linebacker position, many people, regardless of whether you thought Vaughn was going to be the guy or Devin White or whoever, the answer was it doesn't matter who it is. It's the worst linebacker room in the league, right? That was essentially it didn't matter who won the job. It was whoever gets this job, it's the worst. Well,
by the way, that's how Nick Sirianni earned his $20 million contract. He told Vic Fangio, put him at off-ball linebacker.
Yeah, there you go. Put this guy at off-ball linebacker and watch him flourish like a flower, right? That's exactly what happened there. But yeah, you just don't know.
Did I miss something? Did Nick say that at some point?
I thought that was reported that Nick was the guy that told Vic to move him to off-ball linebacker.
No,
I didn't hear that.
Nick said that in a press conference.
Vic?
I have to look through the transcripts. But that being said, the one thing that I think is very intriguing moving forward from this point now is, number one, what veterans now do they target because of areas that they feel we're not good enough at? They got 7 tight ends on this on the roster right now. I mean, some undrafted guys, some mini camp guys, but 7. There's 7. So what's going to happen with that tight end spot? That's one. Which veterans do they bring in at areas where they think? Now, they brought in Adoree Jackson already. Is that qualify as, hey, if all else fails, Adoree Jackson's fine, and he is, the guy that
it was Mekhi Becton, by the way. I was wrong on that. It was Nick who said Mekhi Becton should move to guard. My bad. I thought it was Bond.
Yeah, I just
John gave me the look. I'm like, I might be wrong on that.
That was all Mick.
Which veteran players do they target? Like, is Adoree Jackson? Like, do they feel like, hey, if we want Ringo to win this job, but if he does it, we got Adoree Jackson and we're cool with that? Like, is Adoree Jackson just a solid enough player? Won't, embarrass you out there, and is a solid veteran? Fine. Do they look to bring in a safety that's a veteran? Right now, that room is very green. Very, think about it. People love Reed Blankenship because, he was a part of that defense last year. He was the safety on the team 2 years ago with Terrell Edmonds and Kevin Byard and the guy from Tampa that was always hurt, whose name's escaping me. But that year didn't go so well.
Yeah,
who was that guy? Justin Evans?
Justin Evans, yeah. He started. That was
Justin Evans started. Terrell Edmonds played. Then they finally traded for Byard. They played everybody at that safety spot. The one constant was Blankenship for the most part, and that didn't go so well.
Justin Evans was sort of the Nakobe Dean of that year. All of a sudden, it's is it going to be Terrell Edmonds or is it? And Kevin Byard was a trade pickup in season.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget who the other safety was, but it was, Terrell Edmonds and I'll try to look it up, and Reed was taking every first team rep. Reed was entrenched with, I think, surprised a lot of people. And then all of a sudden last week at training, here comes Justin Evans. And, he was a 2nd-round pick and he was a big time emerging talent in Tampa Bay early in his career. And then he's just had a bunch of injuries. And so you're thinking, well, maybe he's healthy. Maybe he can play. Maybe he can. And he played the first couple of games. He's injured. You never see him again. I mean, it's one of those things where decent player, but just the injuries overwhelmed his career. But in the case, look, I think Reed's a better player, I think, than most Eagles fans think because of his undrafted pedigree. Like, I think people default to that. Like, he's always an undrafted guy. He's undrafted. How good could he be? Well, I see him play every week. He's damn good.
Yeah.
He was damn good last year. He wasn't the problem. And he was one of the guys.
Sometimes you're not the problem, but as a unit, if he's the guy you're relying on to be the best guy of the unit, are you good enough?
Yeah, the problem is replacing CJ and what he brings to the defense.
Absolutely.
That's the problem. That to me is wholly different from Reed. I think, Reed's rock solid at his job. But to assume that Andrew Makuba or Sidney Brown are going to replace CJ's production, they'll probably won't be as big a pain in the ass while having that production, but I'd rather have the pain in the ass with the production.
Of that group right now, right? You got Makuba, you got Sidney Brown, Tristan McCollum, Lewis Seen. You got 4 guys who have a combined 10 games. Really, Sidney Brown really hasn't played all that much. He started a little bit as a rookie, but you got McCollum who got on the field a little bit last year. So you got basically no experience at your safety spot. So that right now, there's a definitive no answer for what that spot is. Your corner spot, if you're going with Ringo, he's got some experience, but not a whole heck of a lot. So that's a complete wild card at this point. The other 2 areas, I like Morrow. I think he can do, is he going to make $26 million based on what he does this year?
He ain't going to be Milton Williams. I like Morrow too, but he ain't going to, bottom line, he ain't going to be
That's
Milton
my point,
Williams.
And he ain't going to get paid here if he is that.
I think Morrow, at least you could say, okay, is he Milton Williams? No, but at least I know he can do the job. He's played. He's had a role here before. I can at least say, hey, so the question is, who replaces what Morrow did, right? And does that guy, is that Ty Robinson? Is it somebody else? Is it Thomas Booker, Gabe Hall, one of those guys? Can they have a bigger role? So your top three guys, I think you're still within range of what you did last year, replacing Milton Williams. Are you better than Milton Williams? No. But at least you've got a guy who was here and played as much as Milton did. At safety, you don't have a player that played anywhere near. Ringo has played nowhere near what the guy previous did. And then at the edge spot, Jalix Hunt is such a wild card. This guy was playing safety in the Ivy League 3 years ago, and now you're relying on him to replace Josh Sweat, who just had 2.5 sacks in the Super Bowl, and you're saying, hey, man, you were meandering at Harvard, and now you're replacing Reggie White's position. What do we that's what's going on here right now.
Yeah.
So,
but Josh is one of those guys I think people will recognize now that he's gone. That guy was just rock solid.
Yeah, consistent every
just
time.
Rock solid.
And because he's not, as John, you point out a lot, the number of sacks, it's not that's not the number of sacks, it's the other stuff that goes around. He's not a 15 sack guy, so he's not mentioned.
He's an every down edge, though.
Oh, yeah.
Correct. He sets the edge very well. He came up big in big moments. I'll tell you that. I don't think anybody was like, oh, man, Josh Sweat's my favorite player. He's amazing. He wasn't Hassan Reddick from 3 years ago. That dude was all over the place getting to the quarterback. But, yeah, you're losing Josh Sweat, and you're replacing him with Jalix Hunt. I actually like Ojulari. I was a big fan of that signing. I think that one's going to be a little bit of a surprise for people.
Hopefully. He had a lot of injury issues with the Giants.
He did. Yep. The Eagles have taken the chance on a lot of these guys with the injuries and saying, hey, but I think Ojulari, if he can stay healthy, is the guy that separates from that group.
Oh, I agree. He's the best. I think if you ask me who's going to win that other job, I would say Ojulari over Hunt. I've said that pretty consistently.
If Ojulari's healthy and it's this group of guys and they don't bring anybody else in, I, at the end of the year, will think that we would say, man, they found this guy again. What a great pickup. That's the guy.
Mike, give me something positive, man. Who's your favorite draft pick this year, man? You like anybody to have a big year? Who's got the highest upside? Give me something, Mike. What do you like in the draft this year?
Well, I love the Campbell pick. I did, and I was shocked. Literally, it's 11:27 at night, and I'm getting ready to pack it in, and I see the Eagles make a trade. And at that moment, I'm like, they made a trade up one spot. Who could they be targeting here? And when they said Campbell, I fell off the chair. I was like, whoa.
By the way, guys, I got to break in. Eagles are exercising the 5th-year option on Jordan Davis.
There you go. We were waiting for that news, John.
So there you go.
All right.
Which I told you yesterday. I told you during the draft. Howie non-confirmed, confirmed.
Gotcha.
We believe in Jordan.
So
Davis.
I love the Campbell pick. I hope he has a big impact this year. I'm very intrigued to see what they do with him. Is this because they don't think Dean is ready to play, or are they just going to use him all over the place and kind of, unleash him as some sort of wild card joker type of player, similar to what Dallas had to do with Micah Parsons. Parsons, people, he was a linebacker. They had so many injuries that they put him on the defensive edge, and he was such a game record that they just kind of kept him there. So Campbell, I like the pick a lot. He's got to be healthy. That's number one. But I did like that pick. Makuba, I like the player. I just don't think he's going to be better than Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I'm sorry. That doesn't mean he's going to stink. I think you're
right. I don't think that guy's going to be Chauncey, especially year one. Maybe he could get to that point.
Yeah. Well, for instance, Milton Williams was pretty insignificant as a rookie. Yeah. He played a little bit more in his second year. In fact, his second year, I think he had 4 sacks in very limited snaps. And I remember talking to him. I was like, listen, if this guy could get more snaps, you double his snaps. Can he go from 4 sacks to 8 snaps? And he just kind of slowly progressed to the point, and he's never had a year numbers-wise that you were like, Jesus, this guy's a beast. But he made a big enough impact, but it was a slow rise for Milton. He, insignificant.
Very slow.
Very slow. So even if Ty Robinson has a role, I would imagine it's not a huge role like Milton was as a rookie, and he might flash in small amount of snaps, and you might say, why isn't this guy getting more time? I was always championing for Milton to get more time, but Ty Robinson is 285 pounds. I mean, he's a smaller defensive tackle, so he might not be able to play half the snaps right away. They probably need to get him bigger and stronger. So I like the Ty Robinson pick. I do wonder, they traded. I was in the car a lot on Saturday, and they just kept trading back. Was there not a player in the 3rd round that, I mean, they completely overlooked adding more talent in the 3rd round?
No, they were trying. Howie said they were trying to trade up at one point and didn't work out. Sometimes the assumption, I say it all the time, way too many people assume, oh, they want to trade up, they'll trade up. You need 2 people. You need 2.
Right. A lot of Eagles fans think they were boxing Howie out on purpose. I don't know if you guys think there's any merit to that.
Well, you get boxed out when you're at the bottom of every round. You always get boxed out.
I was just surprised because they had so many draft picks piled up that they kept trading back to add more.
Right. I thought they were going to use the picks to move to get less picks.
I look at 96 and I say, who were they trying to go up and get? And, 95 was Jared Wilson. I'm pretty sure it wasn't Jared Wilson, center from Georgia, although he is from Georgia. Dylan Gabriel, pretty sure it wasn't Dylan Gabriel. There was a safety, Jonas Sanker, but they already took the safety. Jalen Milroe was 92. They don't want Jalen Milroe. Although who knows, but I doubt it. Emory Jones was a tackle. Josiah Stewart was an edge rusher. From Michigan. I guess that's a slight possibility. Wyatt Millum, guard from West Virginia, your guy, Mike. That's a possibility. They did homework on him.
How about the 101 trade back, John? Wasn't Jalen Travis taken right before there? That was the guy I thought maybe they might.
Charles Grant.
Charles Grant.
No, but if they wanted Charles Grant, they would have took him at 96. So I think that the trade at 96 was the key. They wanted to move up from 96, and when they couldn't, they just moved down again to try to maximize probably from their point, the grouping fell off. Yeah. And they felt comfortable going into the 4th round.
That said, Zander, I'm talking about Ty Robinson. I like the player a lot. I think he's going to have a role on this team. I don't know how big it is, but again, like my point is, Milton made $26 million based on the year that he had, not the career that he had, right? I mean, they didn't look back and say, as a rookie, man, this guy is going to be a $30 million player. But I think Robinson can have a role in this team that makes a little bit of an impact right away. I do like Smile Mondi, as I thought he was a pretty sneaky pick at 5. Very productive player, Georgia player, little small on the smaller size, but I wouldn't be shocked if Nakobe isn't ready, if he's a factor right off the bat, because that dude could play. He is a beast tackler, fast, athletic, and he basically is in that spot because he got hurt, same as a lot of these guys, but that dude is a player, big time. So like that, and I like their deep picks. Whatever. I mean, you're talking about offensive linemen in the 6th round, but Hinton's dad was a beast. I can tell you that much. His dad
was a hell of a
He was on the show yesterday, our afternoon show. Chris Hinton was on our show. Really good, really cool to hear him.
Should be in the Hall of Fame.
Chris Hinton was a stud. If his kid is anything close to him,
he's not.
You got Jeff Stoutland. Well, let's say Pete Kendall.
Chris Hinton was the 4th pick in the draft. He was Lane Johnson.
Yeah, he was awesome. Yes.
Yeah. All right, Mike. I want to give you I want to give you a range. All right, for Jihad Campbell. The range is, and I know they're different positions, so it's going to be hard, but I think you'll understand what I'm saying. The range is Nolan Smith rookie year, and the other side of the range is Quinyon and Cooper's rookie year, where they were huge parts of the defense. Jahad Campbell will fall where? How big of an impact will he be rookie year?
Well, I would say somewhere in the middle of those two. Somewhere between Nolan Smith.
If you had to go,
that's a good thing. I was worried you were going to say Nolan Smith.
If you had to go 50-50 though, if you had to lean one direction, so go 51-49. You going up or going down?
That's good. There you go, John.
As much
I
as
got to go toward Nolan,
This
I
is
would
not
even
even
go towards Nolan.
this is not even hard for me. I'm going towards Nolan. Negativity continue, but it's more about the injuries.
Yeah,
I got no idea when this guy's going to be ready to play.
I don't even know what they're going to do with him.
Well, yeah, but I mean, we know what they want to do with him.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
But I use Cooper as an example. Remember, Cooper hurt his hamstring.
Yeah,
and I remember
for
talking
4 weeks.
Yeah, he didn't play for 4 weeks because he hurt his hamstring 20 days before training camp. And he was out for 3 weeks in training camp. And Vic decided, oh, we gotta push this back for 4 weeks. And Cooper was changing positions from his college position. So part of it was learning a new position. This guy's learning a bunch of different positions. At least that's the projection, Jahad Campbell. I have no idea when he's going to be healthy. Everybody talks about Nakobe Dean. Well, what makes you think Jahad Campbell's going to be there week 1? He just had labrum surgery.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Quinyon
plural.
Mitchell to me.
That plural word that's sticking in my head.
Oh, by the way, did you see Albert Breer's report about Jahad Campbell?
I did. I actually read that from your repost yesterday on my show. I would say Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean had about as high quality of rookie seasons at the positions that they play that you can have. I mean, that is tough to top, to get 2 guys at those positions where a lot of mistakes are made to excel at the level they did. To assume that you're going to get a player, another rookie, and they're going to excel at that level, that's a lot of expectation. So to answer that, I'd have to go slide it closer to what Nolan did as a rookie. Now, I can make the argument that Nolan maybe should have been given more of an opportunity as a rookie. I don't know. Probably wasn't ready.
Probably should have.
Right. So hopefully the Eagles allow and give Campbell more of an opportunity based on the fact
Nolan
that
had the shoulder in year 1, right? Didn't he? Have
well,
remember he had that famous quote, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
But that was a chronic condition. One of the reasons Nolan fell in the draft from a potential top 15 pick to 30, similar to Jahad Campbell. Injuries happens all the time. People were concerned about it. Nolan, as you mentioned, one of the great quotes ever. That's my baby. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We all looked at him like, what are we going? And, he proved, at least for half a season last year, that his baby held up, but he tore his triceps in the Super Bowl. So I guess you have to throw that in the mix as well. With Jahad, he had surgery in March. I mean, if you look online, and I'm not a doctor, but labrum surgery is 6 to 12 months, was a pretty wide range. But let's say 6 months, because he's a high-level athlete. Well, April, May, June, July, August, September is month 6.
Yeah.
Start of the season with no training camp.
Training camp.
And Vic Fangio's defense?
I don't think he's starting week 1. There's no way.
I mean, look what happened. Cooper was out for 3 weeks in training camp with a much less serious injury. And it took him to week 5 to get in the lineup.
Yeah.
So I think people need to temper their immediate expectations with Jahad Campbell. And Howie said, long term, we have no concerns. That's what I think you should be focused on.
I would imagine to get drafted in that spot, the medical stuff has to be checked up, down, inside out. Now, somebody texted in to my show the other day and said, "Oh, they got Sidney Jones completely wrong. He had an Achilles problem. They drafted him.
Right, he gets some wrong. I mean,
Exactly.
It happens all the time.
So just because the doctors have said, hey, because look, they get criticized a lot for not taking DK Metcalf. Well, Metcalf had a medical red flag with his neck, right? I mean, he had a neck problem that.
Yeah, he was off their board till day 3.
Correct. So when they took JJ Arcega-Whiteside and DK Metcalf was there, not because they didn't think, maybe they thought DK was better, but medically they were told, hey, you can't take this guy because of a medical red flag. That red flag was not on this particular player, so they felt comfortable enough taking him, which is why I think we should feel comfortable enough that he will be ready at some point. When that point is, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, long term, and that's what Howie said. Long term, there's no concerns.
Well, and one thing I think the draft is for the long term, not immediacy. But when you're at that draft and in that moment, you want that guy to play and contribute right away.
Especially when you lose all those guys on defense.
And especially, it's a first-round pick, and we're all just kind of trained, hey, you're a first-round pick, you got to play. We just saw 2 years ago, Nolan Smith was a first-round pick, and he did not play. And they were drafted essentially in the same spot.
Remember, the Eagles are a good team. So
and remember, Mike, just like Nolan didn't play, we've also had Quinion who played, Devontae Smith who played, Jalen Carter who played. So there's also those examples that people look to, and they tend to side toward the positive. And I think people are expecting that.
Jalen Carter was also projected to be the number 1 player in the draft.
I know. He's different. I know. But same with Devontae.
Now, listen.
But those guys were healthy, too. I mean, that's a big part of it. I'm just saying, absolutely. Temper your expectations for week 1. That's all I'm saying.
Well, listen, if he's ready to go and can get on the field in training camp, and we don't know what his timeline is, but if he can be on the field in training camp and can then compete realistically for a position, that changes the dynamics. That, hey, if you're out there competing and can show us right off of, is he going to be on the field this weekend? I would doubt it, right?
No. Well, next weekend. Yeah. It's not official yet, but I assume rookie camp is going to be next weekend. But,
it's the 3rd. It's the 3rd and the 4th. It's this weekend.
I've got no information on that.
I thought it was May 3rd and 4th. I'll have to double check on that. That's what
you might be right. They haven't alerted me.
John, which is not left out in the dark, brother.
But they do things last minute. So they do things very last minute.
All right, Mike. Thanks for the extra time today, man. You came in.
Thanks for bringing. Now I have to check. Thanks for bringing that up to me.
You might have to work.
Came in here with a 5-gallon jug of gasoline, and you unloaded the entire thing on the Birds 365 community, and I love it. Mike Gill, well done, brother. We appreciate it. Make sure you guys follow him at Mike Gill Show everywhere. Also on YouTube. Go subscribe to his YouTube channel at Mike Gill Show, and listen to him on 97.3 ESPN down the shore. Mike, thanks for doing it, man. We'll talk to you again next week.
See ya.
Thanks, Mike.
Coming in. Great stuff from Mike.
I'm trying to look at.
He's got you in a frenzy, doesn't he?
Yeah. Well, it was May 3rd last year. I don't know what he's looking at. Like the Eagles published off-season work was, their OTAs and things like that. That's been public for a while, but that doesn't include rookie camp.
They heard you. They heard you say the team who's signing too much, Johnny Mac. They're
no. This is just how they work. And now it wouldn't surprise me at all. But boy, I was hoping not. Similarly, because I have a tree guy coming over on Friday, so I was crossing my fingers that it would be next week from a selfish standpoint. But yeah, it's not.
I don't think it's confirmed. I haven't seen it anywhere.
Yeah, it's not. They're not trying to be. They do things late, so I'm not saying it's not possible. But I'm hoping this is Wednesday. I'm hoping it's going to be next week.
Johnny Mac, the breaking news: Jordan Davis's 5th-year option has officially been picked up, which guarantees him $12.9 million in 2026. And Jordan Davis is here to stay at least for the next 2 seasons in Philly, securing the run defense, the run stopping element of the defense. Johnny Mac, your initial reaction there to Jordan Davis's 5th-year option getting picked up, which most of Birds 365 community was ready for, thanks to you.
Yeah, I don't think it's a surprise at all. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I tried to say one or the other. I don't think 13 million at this stage, and it's a little bit under that for a defensive tackle is much of an issue at all. It's basically just a placeholder anyway. And the Eagles now have a long time to try to work out some kind of extension. That to me is the difficult part. That's where you have to see where the value is. And run stopper, 2-down player. Or, do they think he could be more than that? But I think he could be more that crowd. Like, I don't know what that looks like. Because I mean, you want your best pass rushers on the field. In what world is Jordan Davis going to be a better pass rusher than somebody like Moro Ajomo? I mean, how is that going to look? How is that going to happen? Even if you look at a rookie like Robinson, I mean, he's a 300. He's a massive man. He's just not a pass rusher. And I think that was the mistake by I'm not even saying the Eagles expected that. But I think that was the mistake by a lot of draft people who looked at his athleticism and said, well, this guy could turn into a pass rusher. I even heard some guys, and I'm not going to pick on him, but say he could be an edge rusher. He's so athletic. I'm like, what? There's more to it than athletic. It would be easy. You need technique and handwork and Chris Long was I saw on his interview, I think it was his podcast, but he was talking to somebody. He's talking about length of offensive tackles, what the difference, why they pay so much attention to length of offensive tackles. And he was talking about what you have to do to combat that as a pass rusher. It's very technical, fundamental technique. So I never envisioned that. So I think the expectations were out of whack. Now, can he improve as a guy who pushes the pocket? Yes. And that's what you hope for. And you saw some of that in the playoffs, by the way.
Yeah.
Because he played very well.
He played his best football probably in the playoffs.
Yeah, a lot of people did. And that was a magical run. But so you hope he can get to that point. But I don't see any way. And in fact, I see it going the opposite way, where you have lighter people rushing the passer. And guys like Jahad Campbell, stand-up rushers inside. Maybe that's where he fits in when he's completely healthy. I don't see someone the size of Jordan Davis being on the field in 3rd and 13 anywhere. Even at Dexter Lawrence, I could look at, so you want to be more impactful just in the flow of the game as a pass rusher? Because obviously, on 2nd and 6, he may stay in the game. They may throw it. They may run it. He's got to be more impactful in those types of situations. But then you have to ask yourself, what is that worth? What is that worth? Essentially a 2-down player, but a high-level 2-down player. That's the difficult part.
So you think this is a placeholder for an extension? What type of extension you think they would give to Jordan Davis?
Well, that's the difficult part.
Yeah.
Like, where does it go? I'm not giving him Milton Williams money, especially when you have Jalen Carter going down the pike. He's not accepting 13 million
money, John. I know you talked about, that's just the way contracts work. I understand that, but 18 million, I think, is too rich for him, especially with how many snaps.
That's probably the wheelhouse of what you're talking about, I would think. And then it's, is it worth it?
Yeah, I wonder what the Eagles are thinking on the inside of the locker room or inside the NovaCare complex on what the value is on that type of a player. Because I will say this, I do think he's valuable. Like, if you can't stop the run in the NFL, you're not going to be a very good defense. So I think he brings that, and that's very valuable. the muddy part is obviously the price tag that you put on it and building the roster, the rest of the roster, along with that price tag.
Yeah. So that to me has always been the bigger question. Like I've said, I think people get way too caught up on on 50-year options. And there will be guys. Now, sometimes it's a no-brainer and you just pick them up because the player's so good. But a lot of times, guys who don't get it picked up, even, have a good final year and teams work it out and do an extension. A lot of times players have been so bad, it's not even a consideration, and they are clearly going to move on. But from the Eagles standpoint, $12.9 million, they don't want that on their salary cap. That's just not the way they typically do business. And this is 2026 again, not 2025. This is 2026. So they have all that time. And, they generally don't want that type of number on their cap. So they'll try to work out an extension if they want. And that's the difficult decision. What does that extension look like? What is it worth? But yeah. And Eagles offseason work, the only things announced, the first day was April 21st, which we told you. OTAs are May 27th and 28th, May 30th, June 2nd, 3rd, June 5th, minicamp is June 10th. They never announce rookie camp in advance, but it's generally either the week after, it has to be the week after the draft or the second week after. So that's your window for that.
We'll see what happens with Jordan Davis, but the option is picked up officially. So Jordan Davis has guaranteed now $12.9 million coming to him in 2026, and that guarantees Jordan will be a part of the team for the next 2 years. So Jordan Davis is here to stay for the next couple of years in Philly, and we'll see what kind of ripple effects that might have as well, for the new draft pick Ty Robinson, for more of a Jomo, for any of the other defensive linemen. The other thing about Jordan, John, or I think he has major value is I do think he helps Zach Bond. I do think he helps Jalen Carter. I do think he helped Milton Williams last year. So, you got to put a price tag on that too, as well, where, he's kind of one of the cogs that makes the rest of the defense go, even if he's not out there for every snap.
Oh, I'm with you. I've been talking about that that's his whole job is to make it
keep the linebackers clean.
Yeah. So, I mean, whether that happens or not, I certainly think the Eagles are aware of his value. But again, it's more difficult than that. It's can you get by? Can you get by with a lesser player? They're part of their success was, turning 1st and 10 into 2nd and 10 or 2nd and 9. And, I've always said about this player specifically, he's got it's almost, he's got to play worse to prove how valuable he is, which is difficult to do. So I think people inside the building know his value. And that's why Howie said what he said after the draft. But there's a difference between that and what they did, use the 13th pick on that type of player. And then all of a sudden, right or wrong, that plays into it when you're talking about salary.
Right. Midnight might bring up a good point here. In 2 years, the salary cap will be such that a team will feel like 13. He might be right about that.
That's possible too.
Probably going to add $50 million to the cap.
But they're probably working on an extension, during next season. And again, 13, that's a little bit of a range, but 13 will be 15 and probably 17. That's a more realistic time frame, and they'll be trying to work on the extension. Like I said, they won't want them to play under 12.9 million for a cap number, but takes two to tango. Believe me, the Eagles were working on an extension for Milton Williams. Believe me, they were trying to sign Milton Williams, but after his first 3 seasons, he didn't get to play that much. They're probably I don't know numbers, but they're probably trying to get him 8 to 12 million, I would say, at the high point. And Milton saw the landscape, and his agent gave him good advice and said, look, Fletcher retired. You're going to be the guy. You're going to have an opportunity to prove yourself. And he proved himself, and he got 26 million.
Yep.
You know, maybe Jordan Davis looks at it like that, and saying, you know what, I'm really good. People will know it, and I'll get a big number somewhere else. So it's a two-way street. It's very difficult contract negotiation, I would say.
Yeah, it is. The breaking news, though, is that his fifth-year option has officially been picked up. So he'll be here for 25 and 26 at the very least, and we'll see what happens from there. We'll keep you posted on Birds 365. Let's go to our main man, Brandon Lee Goutton, BLG from Bleeding Green Nation, joining us now here on Birds 365. Give him a follow on X at Brandon Goutton and read all his work at bleedinggreennation.com. BLG, welcome to the show, man. How you doing on this Wednesday post-NFL draft?
Doing good, guys. Got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, quite a bit. First off, because Mike Gill dropped a bomb. Have you heard anything about rookie camp yet?
It's what, this coming weekend?
I don't know. Did they announce it? They certainly haven't texted us anything. I don't know. That's why it has to be this weekend or next weekend.
Right.
But I was hoping it was next weekend because I have some stuff to do. But anyway, I was just curious if you heard, because I
I've seen some Twitter chatter about this weekend, but nothing official yet.
Yeah. All right. Good. Because, you know, maybe I missed it. But anyway, doing business on the air with BLG. Yeah, I mean, draft, I think, a lot of optimism. It's funny. I don't know how you got from feedback. I think people were disappointed, BLG, after the first 2 days and only 2 players. And then here comes the volume in day 3, and everybody was excited. And it's interesting because the 2 guys that are going to matter most are Jihad Campbell and Andrew Mukuba. Your thoughts on the first 2?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair sentiment. I mean, you look at day 3 last year, and how many contributors did the Eagles really get from that group? Not to say it can't happen, but it's not typically where you're going to get your instant impact, and that's okay. And the day 3 of the draft, and the draft as a whole isn't just about the next season, but still to only have those 2 picks, really. And I just think if you look at, you know, where there's kind of room for criticism too with the Eagles draft as a whole, I would think it'd kind of be that day 2, what happened ultimately, not being able to trade up from 64 when they have a lot of ammo. Howie obviously said that those future picks weren't so enticing to other teams. But not only that, then trading down multiple times, including notably after when Charles Grant goes off the board there to the Raiders, and that's a player the Eagles bring in for a pre-draft visit, and you wonder, you know, if that was someone maybe they wanted there. And also the fact that, you know, when they take Mukuba, when they do, he's the 3rd safety selected in the draft at the time, that then later, when they're going to make a pick, that there's still a lot of safeties on the board there. So Howie's usually good, I feel like, about reading the market, but sometimes you don't know when a run on a position is going to start, or maybe sometimes you start the run yourselves, kind of like they did, I think, with Kyle McCord. A lot of quarterbacks went off the board after he got taken. So there's a game of kind of like chicken there that you have to play. And I think if you're looking for criticism, it kind of could be in that day 2 range where I don't know if they played it perfectly.
Let me ask you about Jihad Campbell. What do you think of him? What do you think year 1 in contribution? And what's your level of concern on the Albert Breer report that we got plural shoulders and knees on the injury front on him?
Well, I mean, he fell to 32 for a reason, right? It wasn't just, everyone forgot he was on the board. It was that some teams seemingly didn't even have him on their board for medical concerns. And, you know, I haven't heard anything about the specifics, but I think it's worth noting that neither Campbell nor the Eagles were definitively saying that he will be ready for training camp or whatever. We'll see. Their first glimpse will be, you know, is he participating at all in rookie minicamp? And we'll see then and kind of get a better gauge where he's at. And I think that's just a contrast of how when, for example, the Eagles drafted Nakobe Dean at the time, there was kind of concern, you know, is this guy healthy? Why did he fall so far? And I'm pretty sure the team and Nakobe were like, he's fine. Like he's ready to go. They kind of shut the injury part down. So, I think those are legitimate red flags with Jahad Campbell. But I think ultimately, where the Eagles got him, certainly not having to trade up for him like they wanted to, but getting him, it's worth the risk at that point.
Yeah, I agree. And Howie talked about long term, and he used that phrase eventually, no concern long term. So maybe people have to temper week 1 talk. If he had surgery in March, which for a labrum, and none of us are doctors, but generally that's at least 6 months. So that'll take you through training camp and really near the start of the regular season. Plus, he's a guy they want to use in a bunch of varied ways, and he's going to have to learn new things. And we kind of saw with Cooper DeJean last year. I mean, he was learning a new position, and he missed 3 weeks of training camp, and he didn't play till week 5. So I think long term, the Eagles are comfortable with the gamble on Jahad Campbell. We'll see how it works, but it might take a little bit longer than I think people are hoping. Now, week 1, Andrew Makuba, he could get on the field if he beats out Sidney Brown. Now you're replacing a very good player in CJ Gardner-Johnson, playmaker. I said they'll probably not be as pain in the ass at times. They'll probably be a little bit easier to handle. But boy, it's going to be difficult to replace the playmaking of CJ Gardner-Johnson. When I see Andrew Makuba, I see, wow, he's small. Do you think that part? And he plays like he's a big guy. I get a little Avonte Maddox vibes from that because I thought Avonte. I'm not comparing them as players, but I think Avonte's an undersized guy who played like he thought he was 200 pounds. I see the same thing with Makuba. What are your thoughts on Andrew?
Yeah, I'm guessing they're going to want him to add some good weight as much as possible, without obviously losing his athleticism there. Because it's a 14 percentile weight there at 146 for a defensive back. It's pretty low. So we'll see if he's able to add anything there. But I agree. I mean, you can't say he's a 1-for-1 CJ Gardner-Johnson replacement just because of how good CJ and productive he's been for the Eagles. But in terms of the profile of a guy who has playmaking ability, I think that's what you're trying to envision when you look at the pick that they made and what they're thinking there. I think especially there's a case to be made that I think the Eagles would make this case that he was a little bit undervalued from the standpoint that earlier at Clemson, he was playing a lot more in the slot than he was free safety like he was last year at Texas. And it seemed like, I'm guessing, that the 5 interceptions he had last year weren't just luck and were related to him playing more free safety, having more view of the field on the back end of the defense, being able to read things a little bit more as opposed to playing so up on the ball like he was in the nickel. So I'm guessing the Eagles think that they're getting him and they're going to use him in a role where he's going to be maximized to be able to make plays like that. So intrigued by him ultimately. I think Sidney Brown, I think Makuba's going to be tough competition for him to beat out. I think the rookie, even though usually you give the leg up to the guy who's been here or the more experienced player, Vic Fangio was not dying to put Sidney Brown on the field last year, and certainly did not draft him or wasn't in the building when Sidney Brown was drafted, and Makuba was. And I think, he's going to have the leg up.
BLG, what are your biggest questions on this defense? We had Mike Gill in last hour, and he comes in with gasoline, baby. And I got questions on 10 out of 11 starters on defense. The only one I don't have
a lot of questions, to be fair.
Jalen Carter. What are your biggest questions on this defense? Obviously, the number 1 in the NFL last year. You lose a bunch of starters. Now you go 5 straight draft picks on the defensive side. What are the biggest questions on this D-line for you?
I mean, there are a lot of questions, even just from a big picture standpoint of when you're that good as you were last year, how can you be that good again?
Yeah,
the
right.
NFL is not typically a sticky year-to-year league in terms of defenses just being dominant like that for the most part. That just does not really hold up. And then especially when you're losing Milton Williams and you're losing Josh Sweat and you're losing CJ GJ, you lost some significant personnel here. And some of that is inevitable. I'm not saying the Eagles had to keep all those players and maybe couldn't even keep all those players. But certainly there are going to be question marks. I mean, like, where's Nakobe Dean at? Like, is he going to be able to play early in the season? Not at all. Is John Campbell ready? So like you look at linebacker, just for example, Zach Vaughn, what's he look like in year 2? Probably hard for him to be as good as he was just because he's an all-pro level. There's really only room to go down. However, he's in year 2. And in theory, he should be more like mentally comfortable playing the position that he didn't really have extensive experience at last year. So you can kind of go both ways on that. I think ultimately, there's enough here for this thing to have the potential to gel and be pretty good. And, I think you look at Nolan Smith, you look at Jalen Hunt, there's potential for some of these young players to take a step forward and be good and maybe offset some of the losses that they've had. But it's not a given. And there are question marks.
You mentioned a little bit in the 3rd round, and I'm with you. I'm trying to figure out. Howie said, they were trying to trade up at one point. I'm trying to figure out who that player could be. You mentioned Charles Grant and the potential when they traded down, because they traded down twice. Now, they could have taken him at 96.
Right.
And he went 99 to the Raiders, and they were at 101, and then they traded down again and traded out of the 3rd round. You get, if it is Charles Grant, or you get too cute, why not just take him at 96? Or, I mean, I don't like that thought process. If you like a player, just go get him. But it's possible. I could see that happening with Howie, just trying to inch out a little bit more value. Do you agree with that type of philosophy or not?
No, yeah, I do at that point, especially you already traded down. Like you don't need to get like another thing that is so great that you'd rather have that than the player. And I don't know for sure that they like Charles Grant, but again, they brought him in for a pre-draft visit. They didn't do it this year, but in the years past, they typically draft those players. I also liked his profile. And he was like the highest graded FCS tackle, if I wasn't mistaken, or offensive lineman.
Yeah, he's a great athlete. He seems like an Eaglesy guy.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I can't say for sure, but it doesn't really feel, based on the messaging and the results, that like they totally, that round went the way they wanted. And also to push back on Howie a little bit, with all due respect, to a guy who's been really good in building this team, he can say that, the future picks weren't really of value to other teams, but like what future picks was he offering? Maybe I'm sure if he could be a little more aggressive with some of those future picks, maybe, then he could have gotten it. Like, I don't know exactly what he was offering when he says teams didn't want them.
To be fair, he's starting at the end of every round. Your picks aren't as valuable at the end of every round, and people kind of know Eagles are going to be good. It's just a matter of how good. So that factors into the future picks as well, not being as valuable as, say, Jacksonville giving up a future pick where you kind of know they're going to muck it up. So that all factors into it.
Sure.
Ultimately, in the 4th round, I thought they got a very good prospect, but I don't want to, I want to get your thoughts. I like the day 3 stuff. I thought they took a lot of nice swings with guys who have some upside. Did you have a favorite guy with the highest ceiling, guy with the highest floor? Let's go that way. Your highest ceiling day 3 pick, your highest floor day 3 pick.
Yeah, I think highest ceiling has to be Cameron Williams. Just, 21-year-old, massive, like just, huge offensive tackle that it feels like the perfect kind of player to give to Jeff Stoutland. This is like the perfect kind of situation. If you're a team that had to have like Cameron Williams play year 1, it's not looking maybe so good. But if you're a team that can just have him sit on the bench and develop, he's 21 years old, again, just massive. It seems like a lot of the red flags with him were more so, lack of experience based and like kind of coachable based. So that seems like the perfect kind of situation for the Eagles to land him and maybe potentially groom him to be a right tackle of the future. Maybe by the time Lane Johnson isn't playing football anymore, Cameron Williams will be in a position to at least compete for that job. And if that's the case, that's great. That's an amazing outcome, especially because the Eagles have been trying to look for that Lane Johnson, potential replacement for the future for a while, and haven't really been able to get that guy, especially early in the draft, especially last year. That was seemingly,
and I like the fact they took 2 swings, because you also got Miles Hinton as well, and maybe he's the guy.
And then Holland Pierce too, that you signed in, like these massive guys that they're getting.
Is that the dude that's like 6'8", 350?
Yeah, he's a Rutgers guy.
Yep.
By the way, I BLG, I think he's got a bad agent. Like, why are you steering your guy toward the Eagles?
He's a local guy. Maybe he wanted to stay home, but
maybe, because generally, if you're an undrafted guy, you want to look for, all right, who needs a tackle? And the Eagles just drafted 2 tackles to have. Now, maybe it's just I want to work with Jeff Stoutland,
right? Because playing anywhere might be an uphill battle at that point,
Or kind of just get like the Jeff Stoutland, aura on you.
Yeah,
because then if you get cut, it's like, oh, this guy worked with them.
Yeah. Just stepping in that room might increase your value a little bit. All right, BLG, you lost a lot of guys on defense, and I know talent acquisition season is not over. Howie has had many instances in the past of adding players late in the process, but I would say the draft is the biggest, part of that reacquisition process. Now that it's over and you look at this team, is there a spot you think they have to target and go and get somebody? Me and John talked a little bit about the edge rusher, depending on what you think of Jahad Campbell. Are they still thin at that room? What do you think Howie's looking at this roster right now and thinking, I need to add here, or maybe it's nowhere. Maybe you feel good about the depth everywhere.
Well, yeah, if we assume Dallas Goedert's here, then I'm not going to say tight end, but if he's not, that's obviously the spot. Yeah. So that's the big question mark. But if we're going to put that aside, I think they have, for the most part here, like a roster that is ready to play now if they had to. And that certainly doesn't mean they won't make additions, because I think they will prior to the season, as Howie will remind us all and has reminded us all, the player acquisition period is not over, even though most of it is. I think some of those spots could depend on, they have OTAs here. If they're kind of going to get a look at how players look, not only in the practices there, but just in terms of how seriously or not they've maybe taken the offseason and how they kind of are looking at guys and confidence level here. Maybe you add a safety at some point down the road, especially if you're not really liking what you see from either Sidney Brown or Andrew Makuba. Justin Simmons obviously still out there. But I think that's the kind of acquisition you're looking at kind of at this point, is like, not some people you're dying to get onto the roster immediately, as much as you kind of maybe let it ride for a little bit in the offseason, maybe even a little bit into training camp, see what you have there. And if you're not loving what you're seeing, then you kind of open that door and sign a veteran.
I think that your options are overblown, BLG, but nonetheless, people make a big deal out of them. In the case, I think Howie kind of confirmed they were picking it up, but it is... They have picked it up, Jordan Davis. To me, it's not about $12.9 million. It's about, they don't want to have that on their cap. So how do you work out an extension? And he's kind of a difficult guy to judge, because he's a 2-down player. How high do you want to go, especially when your other defensive tackle is probably going to make $40 million when he's up next year? Where are you on Jordan Davis and the long-term future with the Eagles?
Yeah, I think this was kind of like a really tough decision. I think usually the 5th-year option is kind of more clear-cut, like, oh, we're definitely going to pick it up. No, we're definitely not. I think this is like pretty much as on the fence as you could possibly be based on where Jordan Davis is in his career. Look, this is a player who's played 47 games. He has 3.5 sacks. That alone doesn't simply outline his value. But also, by the way, 6 tackles for loss and 6 quarterback hits in his career.
I think that's a bigger issue.
So I'm not going to sit here and tell you he doesn't have impact, and the stats might not totally, do him justice. But like, we're talking about $13 million a year for a player, and maybe more, depending on, how things go in the future, for a guy who, and let's even put the stats aside for a second. Like, this is a guy who played 37% of the defensive snaps last year. And in the playoffs, he played 13 in the first game, 17 in the second game, 13 in the third game, and then 14 in the Super Bowl. Like, he just isn't even on the field a lot. So it's a lot of money. I do think the Eagles would rather, I think it's okay to make the mistake of, okay, you paid him too much 1 year for 2025, or for 2026, I should say, for the 5th-year option, rather than, okay, He has an amazing year this year. He did finish the season strong. He had 2 sacks in the playoffs, and I think those were legitimate sacks too. They weren't just gimmies. Against good quarterbacks, by the way, and Jaden Daniels and Patrick Mahomes. And he does things finally click for him. It wasn't until year 4 that things started to click really for Dexter Lawrence. And obviously, he's much more of a amazing player. I don't know if Jordan Davis will become him. But in the event that that outcome happens, all of a sudden, you're looking at a ton of money that you would have to pay to keep him, and you wouldn't get the benefit of having him for the one extra year. So if you're the worst case scenario is they overpaid him for 2026, I think that's okay, as opposed to the worst case scenario is he looks awesome and then you're losing him.
BLJ, who is your favorite draft pick this year for the Birds?
I think in terms of value, I really am intrigued by the guy they got last, and Antoine.
Yeah, baby.
Ryland.
Yeah, a lot of people.
BLJ. 25 and a half sacks in 2 years.
Falling into that college production hype.
But it's such wild production. That's
right.
insane.
That's where I'm at, BLJ.
I don't care. People were like, oh, I was reading the scouting reports. How does he project to the NFL? Yeah. I mean, he had 30 sacks total. He had 22.5 the past 2 years.
I agree.
25 and a half, yeah.
Hey, there's Howie talks about traits on day 3 guys. And normally he's talking about, things in their body, as he likes to say. I think in the case of Powell Ryland, he's a good pass rusher. He's got a lot of savviness. There's something to that.
Yeah.
But
9 forced fumbles too. That's a wildly high number.
Yeah. So I agree. There's something to that, but boy, I mean, the lack of length. We were talking to Ian Cummings, who does a great job with the draft, and I asked him that exact question. How do you measure, from a scout perspective, crazy college production versus, how it's going to translate to the next level? And there's some concerns from the athleticism standpoint, and obviously you're dealing with much better offensive tackles in the NFL, to say the least. I think it's a great pick in the 6th round. Take a roll of the dice, but I remember Joe Osman's production at Central Michigan. I mean, you remember he was going to be a part of this team, finally worked his way up, and he tore his ACL. Looked like Jim Swartz was trying to get him on the field as sort of a joker pass rusher. And then he tore his ACL and it was over. Jordan Mailata still talks about him to this day and how he helped him. Just a great college pass rusher, but it didn't translate. I'm worried about those production guys who last to the 6th round. To me, that's sort of a red flag. Because why wouldn't you pick them?
Right. Exactly. Why not take the chance? I will say, just based on, we saw Nolan Smith take strides. We saw Jalix Hunt take strides. Obviously, those guys were drafted higher. But if you're giving some credit here to Jeremiah Washburn and what he's done, like we talk about, Stoutland, all that he does, and even Vic and what he does, I think Jeremiah Washburn, add him in there. I think I have some intrigue to see if he can get the best out of APR.
Yeah, I agree with that. BLJ, do you think we're putting too much on Vic? Where we kind of have this aura where it's just like, just give him some guys and he's going to turn them into these great players. I know he was only 1 year here in Philly, but you did lose a lot of talent this year. You think we're putting too much expectation on Vic?
I think he's earned that. I think he's earned the right, not to go Jalen Hurts here, but pressure is a privilege. I think that Vic Fangio has very much earned the benefit of the doubt, given how awesome this defense was last year. So, in a lot of cases, I think it's a little it's not even good analysis by what we do to be like, oh, trust them, they've got it, no worries, because they're wrong too, and they get things wrong, and no one's infallible here. But I think with, again, the track record, how good not only the defense was, again, from just the results that we saw last year, but from a player development standpoint as well. They earn the benefit of the doubt in my mind. Doesn't mean that they will get it right, but it does mean that I think that I'm going to give them some benefit of the doubt that they can make it work.
All right, let's circle back, BLG, to Jihad Campbell. You retweeted Fran Duffy's sort of thought, and obviously Fran, for those who don't know, used to work for the Eagles, so he knows a lot of people in that building. And I think it got a lot of traction that after we heard Howie Roseman talk about Jihad Campbell, and even if you look at Alec Halaby's comments on the Eagles website, and then, you know, it's edge. He's going to be a great pass rusher, and then he's going to start at off-ball linebacker. I'll give you the floor. What do you make about what's going on here?
I mean, I think the Eagles value his pass rushing ability, and that is part of why you're willing to trade up for a player. I don't think they're just trading up for a pure 100% off-ball linebacker. But, I mean, when you look at Jihad Campbell's usage at Alabama last year in terms of his snap count, you know, it was mostly off-ball linebacker, and then there's about like 100 or so snaps of him as an edge rusher. And that's kind of what like Zach Bond was doing for the Eagles last year. So the way I see it, I think it is more of a player that they see in a Zach Bond kind of mold where, especially because, God forbid, Zach Bond goes down with an injury. Also, you know, he's only signed for a couple of years here. And how important he was to this defense last year. Like, I think that's a kind of player they don't want to just have one guy of. I think it's one that they would like to have, ideally, multiple, not only because it could make you good now, but also thinking about the future down the road. And I think Campbell has that kind of potential. That doesn't mean, you know, things can't change in the future, but I do think they're adding him with the idea that, you know, he will be an off-ball linebacker who has pass rushing ability as well.
Do you think labeling in the NFL is the problem? Because Howie's very adamant about not pigeonholing this particular player. Like, I get more of the sentiment they're trying to turn him into what Andrew Van Ginkel was in Miami for Vic, which was more of, you know, played off ball, was a joker. We just talked about it, was a joker at times, like Joe Osman, was an edge rusher at times. I think from Howie's words and Alec's words, I think this is a player maybe we haven't seen before. Or at least the projection in Philadelphia. This is a guy who's going to do different things, a bunch of different things, but he's going to be on the field 100% of the time if everything works out. So he might move from off-ball linebacker on first down to edge rusher on second down to joker on third down. Do you think labeling gets in the way of these things?
I think that's fair, but, you know, I think it comes down to, like, the player has to be in one of these position groups first, right? And it was interesting to see that when Campbell was arriving to the Eagles facility, he gave Bobby King a big hug first. I don't know if that matters in the order, but Jeremiah Washburn.
It was interesting because when he met with you're right. It was interesting because when he met with the Eagles, I brought it up at the time.
Yes.
He met with Jeremiah Washburn.
Right.
And then when he got here, he gave the big hug to Bobby King. I'm like, the Eagles are really going all out to put the.
What position group though is? You know, you heard Jason Kelsey. You spend 90% of your time with your position group. Where's he going to go? Well, which room is he going to?
He's going to start with Bobby King.
I think inside linebacker first.
Yeah.
All right, BLG, I'm going to ask you what I asked Mike Gill. All right, I'm going to give you a range, and I want you to tell me where you think Campbell falls year one. The range is, on the one side, it's what Nolan Smith was year one. All right, he didn't play much. He was a 32nd overall pick, similar to where Campbell was drafted. Not much of an impact yet. All right, didn't play much. The other side of it is Quinyon Mitchell, who played every single game and was a huge impact on your D. I know they're different positions, but I think you understand where I'm going. Right. Where does Campbell fall this year for year one production or playing for this football team?
Yeah, it's not going to be to the level of Quinyon Mitchell, just from a standpoint of like few rookies would ever be. I mean, you could be a really good rookie and still not even get to where Quinyon was last year, or Cooper DeJean for that matter. So it's definitely, I think, in the middle of those and above Nolan Smith somewhere considerably, just because I think Campbell will have more of a path to playing time than Nolan Smith really did as a rookie, given how the Eagles roster was constructed. So I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle there, where I think we see a player who kind of like has flashes. Like we see the upside of him. We see that, you know, there's intrigue here, but I also think, you know, they're just because of how they're going to use him. And there are some moving parts in terms of his development that I think it's not going to be a finished product in year one.
All right. At Brandon Goutton, make sure you follow BLG on the X platform. Read him at Bleeding Green Nation. He and his staff do a tremendous job there. I feel like I ask you at this every week, and we're going to keep asking you. It's going to be the James Bradbury situation. Take your Dallas Goedert temperature on where you are. For me, it's changed a little bit. I don't know about you. They didn't take a tight end. I mean, at some point, Indianapolis was a logical landing spot for me. They drafted Tyler Warren. Things are drying up on both sides. I had been below 50%. Dallas isn't going to be here. Now I'm slightly above 50%. Have you moved at all?
I just, like, again, it comes back to what is the plan if he's not here? And the plan clearly now isn't draft someone, which I don't think was ever a great plan, but it's just not even an option. It's not on the table for you anymore.
Even if he's back, I wanted to see him draft someone because I don't want to be in this position next year.
Well, absolutely. And that's a great point because, I mean, I've been saying that too all along, is that even if he is back, I mean, none of these tight ends are signed beyond next season. Like the guys they had in free agency, 1-year deals. Grant Calcaterra, 1-year deal. He's on the roster. It was rookie deal. So there's no future of this position right now on the roster really at all, unless you really believe in like Cameron Latu or like,
Cam Latu, Alabama.
We have a Harrison Bryant truther in the chat as well.
Oh yeah, we got a big Harrison Bryant.
Well, there you go. I think he's a solid player. I think Bryant's a solid player, but I mean, not, again, should be the guy. And when Nick Sirianni talks about this offense runs through 3 players, and Dallas Goedert is one of them, then you either have to keep him or you have to get a very legitimate replacement for that kind of player. And to me, I think the market for Goddard doesn't seem to be burning up. Maybe I'm underestimating that, but I just think with all these teams adding tight ends, like who's out there that's like really dying to pay Dallas Goedert big money?
Did George Kittle complicate anything? Because the only reason I'm not comparing George Kittle's phenomenal, but he's 31.
Right.
And, he's a 5-time All-Pro and, he's the best tight end in football. And he got whatever, 19 million. I mean, Dallas Goedert is top 5, I would say, coming off a great postseason run where he can make that argument, injuries aside. And I'm saying, again, he's not going to be at the George Kittle level, but does that give him at least some weight to say, hey, I gotta be at 14, 15, somewhere in that range?
Perhaps in his mind, I just think there's too much of a difference, not only just in talent, but availability. I mean, George Kittle doesn't miss like these large stretches of games every year. He hasn't missed a bit since 2020. He only played 8 games that season there. And I just don't see the teams that are out there. Like, I don't see it from a team need perspective. Like, who are these teams that drastically need, tight ends and are willing to do that? And from Dallas Goedert's perspective, if he's not getting more than a 1-year deal, like if you're only getting what would essentially be a 1-year deal, maybe a 2-year deal, but really guarantee for one, like, wouldn't you rather just be in Philadelphia where the quarterback, the offense more than you would in a totally new environment, that organization more than you would? I just feel like, again, it has always made sense for both sides to just kind of figure this out for 1 more year and then kind of go from there.
Yeah.
We'll see what ends up happening with it. BLG, man, we appreciate you doing it. Great breakdown today of the NFL draft. The Eagles draft 10 new picks, man. A lot of picks this year. So we broke them down pretty well. We appreciate you doing it, BLG. Make sure you guys follow him at Brandon Goutton and read all his work at bleedinggreennation.com. BLG, well done, brother. Talk to you next week.
See you guys.
Thanks, bud.
BLG joining us here on Birds 365. Great job by BLG here on the show. Interesting stuff, Johnny Mac, I think the Campbell thing is interesting. I really do because
it's going to be a thing all year. It
is, but and has your thought process on it all changed? Because when I asked you, well, no, I'm not saying he's not going to be an edge. I'm saying,
well, he's not going to be an edge.
You told me you didn't think it had anything to do with Nakobe Dean, and I still don't. I still don't think it has anything to do. But if the first couple weeks of the season, both these guys are injured. And the only way to get Jahad Campbell on the field is that off-ball linebacker. Do you think they would put Nakobe on the bench? Like, how do you see that playing out?
I mean,
there's nature of it.
There's a standpoint, and first of all, this is the part that frustrates me. I'm not blaming you because everybody goes down this route. Howie said it had nothing to do with Nakobe Dean.
Right.
Now, if Nakobe Dean's not ready week 1, again, that might be the easiest part to get him on the field, the easiest path to get him on the field. In theory, it would be. Two problems with that. One, Nakobe evidently is way ahead of the process. He might be out there in week 1. Two, and actually I'll add 3. 2, I don't know if Jahad Campbell's going to be ready week 1.
Right.
That's probably the biggest.
Could be neither out there.
And then it becomes, all right, what do you want to do? Because Nakobe's the mic. And do you want to move Zach Bond to the mic? I would think you'd have to move Zach Bond to the mic, and you'd have to start Jahad off at the weak side, which, is affecting 2 positions. I don't know if Vic wants to do that. And then what kind of summer does, I'm up to 4. What kind of summer does Jeremiah Trotter have? Is he ready to go? So a bunch of things completed, but
yeah, right.
In theory, yes, that would be the easiest path if he's healthy. But again, these are all Howie quotes, not mine. And Howie, in the situation of, I'll more entertain it when it comes to Nakobe Dean because, he could potentially be trying to soften the blow if that's the long-term plan. You don't want to insult a very important player, a team leader, blah, blah, blah. So I could see that part of it more than the way he spoke about the player, Jahad Campbell, as a whole. But again, that's a projection. That's a projection. And I don't know, because I'm pretty sure I've been talking about this since the draft. I said, he's going to do everything. He's going to be an edge. He's going to be an off-ball linebacker. He's going to be a flat defender, as I explained. Right. He's going to be a joker. This is a player, the projection from Howie Roseman and Alec Hallaby, not John McMullen. The projection is that he can do all those different things. So if their projection hits, and I assume Bick's a big part of that as well, and when I get to Bick, we'll certainly ask him these questions backward and forward.
Gonna get more clarity there. Because I do think Howie does give, this guy says Howie gives us smoke screens all the time. He's not going to say publicly that Dean's in danger of losing his job. I happen to agree with that.
Well, I can buy at least a little bit more than his actual projection on the player. But again, that's a long term. That's what he used. Long term, both injury wise and because he's got to learn, just because you think he's got similar traits to Andrew Van Ginkel doesn't mean he can wake up on day 1 of his NFL career and do all the different things that he does.
Right.
It's a process. But I think that's where they want to go at the end of the day. And Howie was pretty clear. Alec was pretty clear about that. But I get it. I've done it for 30 years. Like I said, his first rep's going to be an off-ball linebacker, and everybody's going to pigeonhole him as off-ball linebacker. That's what Howie freaking said in the press conference. Go look at the transcript. It's on Eagles.com. He used the word pigeonhole. I don't want to pigeonhole this player. Everybody's trying to pigeonhole this player. I can only say what he's going to do a bunch of different things. One of those things is off-ball linebacker. One of those things is edge. One of those things is flat defender. One of those things is inside pass rusher. I'm going to stand up inside pass rusher. If they can get him there, but it is a projection. And I guess the worst case scenario, the default setting, is he just turns into an off-ball linebacker. If you want to go there, they have a much bigger vision, and they don't want to pigeonhole the player. Is that even fair? It might not even be fair.
Right.
How many players in the NFL? I can't think of another player, literally, in the NFL that plays a similar role to Andrew Van Ginkel. So is that even fair to project that kind of versatility? I'm sure there are, and somebody in the chat, if they can think of someone who does all those different things. So in a lot of ways, I say that's a pretty big, as Jerry Seinfeld would say, matzo ball to put on a young player.
I agree. John, I forgot the super chats, brother. We got to get through these. We're overtime here today, so got to get through these though. JD3 checks in, and I by the way, good explanation. JD3 says Vic has constantly told us he doesn't like to label players, yet people are still trying to label.
They
Campbell.
try to label everything.
I just hope he is a good pro player.
That's what I said to BLG. I think labeling is a big problem in the NFL. It's like you have so many of these guys, and more of the sort of safety linebacker hybrids. There's a ton of them who play like a bunch of different positions, but everybody wants to label everybody.
Don't you think it's going to get worse too? I mean, look at all the players that are coming in. You see so many more Swiss Army knives, across the league, especially here in Philly, kind of what they just drafted. I think the labeling is going to be an even bigger issue coming up here.
Oh, yeah. I've been talking about that for years. And part of that is because you have to label for contracts and that stuff and franchise tags, and that conflates things.
Which matters for the business side of it, too. Yes. And these guys checkbooks, That's why people talk about, Cooper DeJean or, any of these.
But even today, some of the smartest football minds say, well, the Eagles play a 3-4. Well, show me when the fuck they play a 3-4.
Yeah,
it's Jonathan Gannon got here. You'll see all over the place. Well, the Eagles have, because they have a nose tackle.
Right. It's outdated. It's way outdated.
Yeah. I mean, drives me crazy.
Midnight Lexicon checks in. He says, isn't it already too late to get additional vet help at edge? That would actually be beneficial to the team and not just take up a roster spot.
No, there's trades. There's still free agents, not, splashy free agents. When you get to training camp, there'll be guys who, again, CJ was traded for the first time. Ronald Darby during the Super Bowl. He was a trade in August.
Yeah.
It's not, the vast majority of what Howie calls talent acquisition season is over, but he always adds a piece here and there.
Yeah.
And that would be still one of the places where, and a lot of it depends on what they think of Ojulari and Uche. And that might spill into training camp. And they say, all right, these guys aren't going to be it. We got to go a different route. And by that time, maybe you have a player like CJ. And by that, I mean a guy who's, in his rookie contract, for whatever reason, it hasn't worked out with his current team, but he's got some upside. Maybe you uncover it in that way.
Bird Gang says, one thing you can count on from J-Mac and Mike is they will bring up the negatives.
Well, it's funny.
Mike was funny today, though, man. He was he was funny today, Mike. He was cracking me up.
It's funny because, I say it all the time. People want validation. No, I just give you my honest opinion.
Yeah.
And it's not always right. But, to assume that rookie players are going to replace Josh Sweat and Milton Williams and Darius Slay and CJ Gardner-Johnson is pie in the sky type shit. So if you don't like that, go find the cheerleaders.
Midnight Lexicon again. Thank you, brother. Appreciate your support. Can we get clarification on Campbell? Both knees, ?
Yeah, I mean, that's and both shoulders.
Yeah, I did think it was like a little bit of a, not weird, but it just was hard to decipher exactly what Breer meant. I did take both knees, both shoulders as well.
Yeah, no, definitely it wasn't hard to take. I mean, look, for people that
I just never heard of that. I mean, we didn't hear of that before that.
Well,
both knees, both shoulders.
That's the point. we don't get.
You're like crippled top to bottom with both knees, both shoulders. That's like
He's got issues in both knees and both shoulders. Doesn't mean, again, some teams took him off the board. Look, I got the same information. Albert just nailed it down as to the specifics. If you listen to this show, I mentioned 2 players that everybody had first round grades that might fall. Jahad Campbell and Will Johnson, the cornerback from Michigan. I wasn't the only one because we're all getting the same information at the same time. They both magically fell. And for the people that have a difficult time, and I had a bunch of them, Albert Breer's lying. Albert Breer's, yeah, he's lying. I mean, that's an awful big coincidence that we got. Hey, some teams have some injury concerns over these 2 particular players. I'm really lucky if I picked the 2 players that fell pretty significantly. And for injury reasons, I'm not talking about Shedeur Sanders for other reasons. For injury reasons, that's pretty lucky, guys.
Yeah.
I ain't that lucky.
No, I got you. Rashid Mixon checks in. Blankenship PFF 22-24 in order. He was 25th out of 166 safeties, 26 out of 174, and 25 out of 171. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah, well, and for that knucklehead that said I'm always that, all I do is talk up Reed Blankenship.
Yeah. Well, just finish it. The defense as a whole was bad. 23. Reed was not the one to worry about.
No,
I agree with that. Yeah.
No. All I do is Reed Blankenship is the most underrated player on this team from this fan base. I've been talking about him for years.
Yeah.
But that's not negative. So
when will that contract come? Reed Blankenship.
He can be extended now because he was undrafted. Right?
We'll see what happens with him. Vulnerable Vitality. Great show. Have a great day, everyone. Vulnerable. Thank you, brother. Appreciate your support. As always, one of our great Rich Nutt checks $5. No comment. Let me see if we put one in the chat. Yes. Who will be an Eagle longer, JD or Dean? I'm going to go JD.
Yeah, I don't find a path for Nakobe to be back. I said it pretty consistently because I said either he's going to prove he's healthy, he's going to play at a high level again, he's going to price himself out of the Eagles market, or the injuries are going to continue to crop and the Eagles aren't going to want him. I don't see a path to any other avenue, unfortunately. And they have now. It might be Campbell. It might be Trotter. It might be Smile Munden. They're preparing for that eventuality, unlike Dallas Goedert. And it's a shame because Nakobe played really well last season, really well. But, I mean, the injury issues have been significant, and that's part of it.
Johnny Mac, great show, brother. Your final thoughts on this Wednesday edition. We're way over time, but we had to get to the super chats. Appreciate everybody for their super chats. Your final thoughts, James.
Yeah, I got to figure out when the hell rookie camp is. And I got to
travel mode now. You're gonna have to call the tree guy, Johnny Mac. Tell him
I got to call the tree. Yeah, what a nightmare. Come on, Bob. It's closed circuit to Bob Lang. Push it back a week. It's not up to Bob, but.
No, it's not. Yeah. We'll see what they end up doing, and we'll keep you guys posted on that as well. John, great show today, brother. We'll catch you tomorrow on Birds 365, right?
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
All right, there's Johnny Mac. John McMullen, the #1 Eagles beat reporter in town. Give him a follow at JF McMullen. Well done by him. Well done by him today. Interesting conversations with all of our guests today, Mike Gill and Brandon Lee. I thought Gill was hilarious today, dumping some gasoline on all the questions he has on defense. I thought they were fair, though. I don't think any of the questions he asked are unfair. You can have the opinion it's going to work out, but I don't think the questions that he asked were unfair. BLG, some good intel as well. Zander time today. Always some Zander time. JD3. I'll be giving you guys some Zander time here. I got all my super chats. Thanks everybody for the super chats. What do we want to talk about on Zander time today? Yesterday, our Zander time was clouded with some bullshit. All right. I gave you an update, though. Yesterday at this time, it was at 300,000 views. We've 10x'd. We've 10x'd in the last day, everybody. We're up to 3 million, all right? We've 10x'd on that sucker, but I'm not talking about it today. I don't really care anymore. All right. Bombay says Mike was drunk. Mike was great today. I thought Mike brought up good points. I mean, look, Bombay is an Eagle fan. He's going to think, hey, man, a lot of those questions are going to work out. So he's going to say Mike's drunk. Mike brought up good points. You know, I mean, listen, my opinion is that a lot of those things that he brought up are going to work out in the Eagles' favor. But it's not unfair to say, well, you can't guarantee a sophomore player is going to be, you know, what he was. You can't guarantee a guy like Nolan Smith who's only showed it for half a season, or a guy, you know, you can't guarantee those things. So I don't have a problem with him bringing up the question. You know, I don't have a problem with him bringing up the question. Mike can't stand his ground on the tush push, though, Xander. Why? He didn't stand his ground? I thought he said he didn't like it. I didn't agree with him. I mean, he said it's an unfair advantage, right? I don't agree with that. We got the best offensive line on the quarterback. Why is that unfair? Because go sign an offensive lineman. Go sign a quarterback that can squat 600 pounds. All right? I don't think that's unfair. That's good team building. That's good team building. Mike's tush push means something different in Thailand. Yeah, he might be still recovering from that Thailand trip, man. Are you kidding me? Robert B says, Jordan Davis, 5th year. Are they picking it up? I heard they are. Yeah, they picked it up, Robert. So it's officially been picked up for the Eagles. Locks in $12.9 million guaranteed for him in 2026. And it locks in him for 2 years in Philly. I think this was, you know, even now that it's happened, obviously we've talked about the different opinions around Jordan Davis and what he's been as a player, but I think we kind of got to put the first round pick thing aside. Like, it's over. You're not changing where he was drafted. I no longer look at it as he doesn't get the value for the 13th overall pick. Is he valuable at $13 million for the year? I would say yes. I would say yes as the best run stopper on the team, right? Like, I get it. You can say, hey, you know, we wanted him to be more. Yeah, but you can't live on that forever. What is the player? What is his value right now? I would say 13 is a fine number for him. You know, when you start talking 18 to 20, then I think you can start wondering, you know, all right, at what point do you draw the line here, you know, on Jordan Davis because of the snaps, because of those things. So I think those are fair, but Jordan Davis officially been picked up, and we'll have him for at least 2 years. So, you know, listen, you know, one of the first things you learn about football, if any of you played, you know, I played back when I was in the what do they call it? CYO, all right, the Catholic Youth Organization, all right. One of the first things you learn in football, can you run the ball and can you stop the run? That's football. If you can't do those two things, you're going to have a hard time winning games. All right, that's consistent at every level. So they can stop the run right now, and they can run the ball. If you get rid of Jordan Davis, how well do you stop the run? How well do you know? What happens on that defensive front when it comes to stopping the run? And what does that change for the defense as a whole? You know, one of my favorite things about the Campbell pick is that regardless of whether you see him as an off-ball or whether you see him as a joker, as an edge rusher, whatever the case might be, it adds to what Vic can do, right? It opens up even more so than it already was opened up, his bag of tricks. It makes it deeper. It makes it bigger, right? That's what Campbell does. I think the same thing goes for Jordan Davis in that, you know, it gives him more leeway to be able to run some of those different fronts, some of the different things you could do on third down, you know. So, and by the way, I think it helps make Zach Bond and Jalen Carter great players. So I got no issue with the Jordan Davis pickup. I think where it gets interesting is like, do you pay him the $20 million or $18 million a year? You know what I mean? Like, that's the question there. James Carver, my guy, checking in. What's up, Carver? Hope you're doing well, brother. I would pay JD 40, best player. Wow. All right. Yeah. Kidding about the 40. I know you are. Love JD, you always have. Yes, you have, Carver. And I do see, you know, Carver is right, though. I will say this, you know, long before people were explaining Jordan Davis correctly, Carver was in the chat trying to explain people what he was doing. You know, now Carver loves him. Carver loves him a little bit more than I like him. But Carver does understand what his role is in the team. James M., I think this is a very good question by you, my friend. I think this is a very good question. All right. He says, all I'm saying is if you got a nickel situation where Campbell is the rusher, then he's in there next to Bond, not Dean. Dean got knocked down a peg because he isn't reliable. John won't admit to that. I think that's probably fair. Like, if you're in a nickel situation, you know, who is that? Who is that second? Off ball. That's fair, James. That is fair. All right. Curtis says, Rich, not of course, but I trust Vic, but the talent matters. Vic hasn't had a top 5D everywhere. I trust Vic enough to say if we aren't good, it's a talent problem. That's fair, Curtis. That's fair. Yeah, Vic is not like, he's not number one defense in the league every year. Last year was the first time he ever had a number one overall day. What is he, almost 40 years in the NFL? So, or coaching, 40 years coaching. So you got to have talent. You got to have talent. You know, I'll ask you guys what I asked some of the guests today. And John, how do you guys feel like post-draft? Because the draft, while I know talent acquisition season is not over, that is the biggest part of talent acquisition season. And you lost a bunch of dudes on defense. Now you got a bunch of new dudes coming in. Like, do you feel pretty good that we brought in the right players for Vic? We just talked about it. If Vic can't make it a good defense, it's a talent problem. Well, how do you feel about the talent as it stands today? Do you think the talent is there? Do you think the talent is there for Vic to be able to thrive? I think Campbell is a very good player. I think he's an interesting player. And I will say those injuries are a little concerning to me. I mean, it's not that I think he's not ever going to be a player. I think he's going to be a great player. But you hear 2 knees and you're like, damn, really? 2 knees, 2 shoulders. You're hoping the guy can be all right. You know, you're hoping the guy can be all right. Texas T says, I'm more optimistic than most. Texas T, I appreciate that perspective. You're certainly entitled to it. All right. I'm pretty optimistic, honestly. Curtis says, I feel good, Z. My concern is still secondary, but with Adoree and Makuba, I feel better than I did about Ringo and Brown. I think Ringo still might be your favorite. All right. I think, excuse me. I haven't been sleeping at all, everybody. Oh, man, a couple hours at night, 3 hours at night. Just not sleeping right now. I'm having some weird pains, so pray for me, all right? If you have it in you, pray for me. Curtis says, I feel good, Z. My concern – all right, I just got that one. My bad, Curtis. Bombay says, the most important thing that's overlooked is we have the same coaching staff on offense last year. I believe in them to make the players better. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree. We definitely have a good coaching staff, but again, they all say players first, right? You know, players first, players first, players first. Hertz is top 5, says the wise man invests in tangible assets. The fool speculates in intangible hopes. A wise man. I like that. All right. Wait, speaking of your name, I want to bring something up. All right. And I know I'm not going to go down this road again with the White House thing. Again, it's over. I don't care anymore. But I was listening to the podcast, someone's podcast who was talking about my tweet. And I gave him a shout out yesterday, Lord Brunson. And then he goes on a show and he's like, Zander Krause was saying they should bench Jalen Hurts. I'm like, what? What the actual fuck? I have been saying Jalen Hurts was the second best quarterback in football for the last 2 months. Now I say he should went to the White House and I think he should be benched. You're going to speak on my fucking name. Get it right. Get it right. I thought that was a stupid ass comment. Zander Krause wants Jalen Hurts to be benched. What? Where did I say that? Someone point to me where I said that. No, he wasn't trolling. I listened to the damn show. The stupid comment. And I would tell him that. Come on, man. Come on, man. Why do people make sweeping things? Like, that's the funniest thing about it. You know, one take, and now it's sweeping allegations about everything. Oh, you're this kind of person. You're this. You're this. Shut up. Shut up. Please. For the love of God. Now I want Jalen benched. Please. Give me a break. JD3 says, I'm with J-Mac. Hard to imagine any of these guys can replace Slay, CJ Sweat, and Milton day one. I feel they can all be good players down the road. I agree, JD. The question is, how fast do they come along? You know, how fast do they come along? I'm not fighting with him. I don't care. I mean, look, he's entitled to his take just like I'm entitled to mine. But if you're just to say that I think Jalen should be benched. Like, go listen to his segment on it. He did it with Tone and that girl Simone, who I've never had a conversation with in my life. Obviously, I worked with Tone in the past. Got a lot of respect for Tone. Xander, you think minicamp is this Friday or Sunday? I don't know. John was wondering. John was wondering. I listened to it. Well, he did say that, right? I listened to him say, Xander wants him benched. No, I want Jalen Hurts bench. Yeah, the guy who's a Super Bowl MVP. I want on the bench because he didn't go to the White House. I mean, holy mackerel. Good night. Damn, Xander, you want Hurts bench? LOL. Yeah, no, I don't. And many of you have told me I'm way too high on Jalen Hurts for putting him as the second best quarterback in football. All right. So pick a side. Pick a side. J-Mac might not have a bigger fan of media than Zay. I'm a fan of J-Mac. I think J-Mac is a smart dude, man. I think he's a smart dude. Xander, I remember the bench Hurts drawing I did for. Did you do it? I got to go look at that. Hey, you had some great ones. I got to revive some of those, dude. The problem was I didn't like the dude who was turning them into digital graphics. You know, your drawings were so damn good. I wanted some dude who like really knew what they were doing. All right. He was talking about in the 23 season. Never once did I want to bench Jalen in the 23 season either. Again, DC Trucker, you want to speak on me, fine, but get it the fuck right. Stupid ass comment like that. When did I find that? I didn't even do content in the 23 season. Now I wanted Hurts bench. I made a video in 2020. I'll pull it up. What was I? 20 years old in the video. I didn't make Eagles content anywhere in my life. I rolled camera in my apartment when I lived in Houston at the time. And I said, bench Carson Wentz for Jalen Hurts. I'm done with Carson Wentz. It was week 2 of the 2020 season. Now I wanted Hurts benched in 23 because I made a take about the White House. Good night, man. Good fucking night. Excuse my language. Excuse my language. Alfredo, what's up, Alfredo? Alfredo's a good dude. He says, I mean, it's only Wednesday. Could get the text today or tomorrow. I just want something to last the time by live action football. I'm with you, man. Let's hope it comes. Let's hope it comes. Now, 2024 draft weekend, brother. Carver, 2024, not 2023. 2024, brother. Last year, 1 year ago. My year anniversary of doing content was a year ago. Again, but people know what I said when I was off the air. Shut up. Ah, crap, man. Get out of here. Fucking speaking on my name. Xander, now I know because it's funny because they were doing that show, I think, when I was on with Cilio. And then some idiot came into the Cilio show when I was on there, and he's like, you want Jalen Hurts benched, you're a racist. And I'm like, what? I clapped back at him during the show. Now I know where it came from. Now I know where it came from. Chris Scott says, I love Johnny Mack. He brings truth and facts. I don't always agree with everything he says, but he's usually spot on. Yeah, facts. You're never going to agree with everything someone says. Like, why is that this? You know, that's the funniest part about everybody. You know, I got this 3 million Twitter thing, whatever. And now I got like everybody calling me every name in the book, everybody assuming all my takes about football. It's pretty hilarious to consume. But the funniest part about it all is all they want me to do is get in line and think what they think. It's not disagreement. It's get in line or else you're this. No. Don't tell me what to think. I don't care you disagree. That's my opinion. Take it or leave it. Yeah, Carver, 2025. Now, bro, time is moving quick, right, James? James, you were, man. You were one of my earliest fans. I do appreciate you for that, bro. I really do. I appreciate that, Carver. I got a warm place in my heart for you, Carver. I love you, brother. I appreciate you, man. I love when Johnny Mack goes full tomato. Yeah, I gotta get him a little bit more full tomato in the off season. He gets mad at me though, so I gotta poke the bear, but you don't want to poke it too much. All right, you don't want to poke it too much. So streets are saying Xander wants Hurts to give his Super Bowl MVP to Josh Sweat. Nah, Hurts earned that MVP, man. Hurts earned that MVP, man. JD3, Z smoking chat pack right now. F them clowns, Z barely any real objectivity on those channels. Jacob has real takes, not just fanboys. I appreciate that, man. I hope everybody sees through some of the bullshit, but not everybody does. That's all right. You know, we have one guy. I just saw the guy who was in the comments here. All right. Maybe he had you confused. All right, well, DC, if you're going to have me confused, get it right. Don't speak if you don't know what you're talking about. I don't put another man's name in my mouth and then profess to my community of people what they believe when I don't know it to be true. That's stupid. Again, I like Lord Brunson. I watch his channel. I think he's a good content creator. I like his takes. Not all of them. I like him. I think he does a good job. If you're going to speak on my name, get it right. Especially on something like that. It's a weird thing to say. All right. I remember when Z first started coming through, I was like, who the F is this dude? Yeah, a lot of people had that take. Don't let them put you in a box. See, Chuck will never let it happen, brother. That's the other thing, Now I'm white, right? I'm white. I'm a white guy. You guys can all see, right? You look at me every single day on the stream. I'm a white dude, right? I can't have an opinion. You can't have a take. The quarterback of the team you cover is black, so because you're white, you can't have a take. What? Guys, where are we going? Where are we going as a society here? I'm with Johnny Mack. Let's elevate the conversation. Content of character. Who cares what somebody looks like? Michael says, I have watched since the beginning of last football season. You are real and true. Thanks, bro. I appreciate that. All right. You're not white. I'm clear. That's fine. Whatever you think. I don't really give a shit. I don't really give a shit about my color. It doesn't matter to me. Color is maybe the most overrated thing, I think, in the world today. Who cares, man? I care about a human being. I'm a man of God. Men of God don't look at people and judge them based on what they look like. All right? I care about what's on the inside. I care about who you are as a person. Xander, you know you're on the right path. I should have went down this road because now we're not talking football anymore. I wanted to talk football on Xander time today. We got into the bullshit yesterday. I wanted to talk football. We started off strong, and I took the bait. Blame me. I'll take the blame. All right? I'll take the blame. All good. All good, everybody. All good. Let me see if I can find let me see if I can find a football take. All right. Let me see if I can find a football take here. Let me see if I can find a football take. Let's talk cars. That's a good one, Chad. Xander bringing potato salad. I don't need potato salad. I look like a potato salad guy to you. All right. I'll man the grill, though. Well, how's Z? Let's talk football. Here we go, Eduardo. Thank you, my boy. What are your thoughts on Sidney Brown now that we brought in Makuba Matata? All right. Oh, Eduardo, I can always count on you to give me some humor, too. All right? I can always count on you to give me some humor, too. Sidney Brown I've never loved just in terms of, I think he's a great special teamer, but the dude has no, does he have discipline? That's what I'm waiting to see, You got it when you're that fast, when you're that athletic, when you hit that hard. I think you got to have discipline in the way you play the game, right? You can't get out of position. You can't make false steps. You got to be a disciplined player. I've yet to see that from him. I think John gives good context. All right. I think John gives good context to it because he says, back in 23, when Sidney Brown did play at the end of the year, he had a pretty good year. Remember that pick six, that long pick six against the Cardinals? Everybody was kind of hype on him. And then because he got hurt, everybody was out on him. But he didn't play last year. Presumably, he was still recovering from the injury. I think it's a wait-and-see thing. If I had to pick who's going to be your starter, I'd go Makuba. All right. Football take. The offense is in real need of a true tight end if Goddard isn't renegotiated because we'll have no inline tight ends without him. Yeah, it is. That's true. I don't know what they're doing at tight end. Carver, I said this, even if you bring Goddard back this year, why wouldn't you draft a tight end? Because now are we going to be in the same position next year? Like if you bring Goddard back and you have Harrison Bryant, shout out to JD3, and you have all these other, 1 year guys, they're all 1 year contracts. JD3 says we have a tight end. Yeah, but he is only here for 1 year. So there's no plan at that position as it stands today. Now, hey, maybe Howie makes a trade. Maybe we are here a sign and or a trade and sign and trade or whatever you want to call it for a guy like Michael Mayer, and we sign him for 3 years, or a guy like a Darnell Washington, somebody that's a backup or somebody that is out there, they bring in. Maybe it's possible. This white boy's Brunson's bitch. I ain't anybody's bitch, Avery. Shut the fuck up. Rolla says, when you compare the Eagles roster to the majority of the other teams in the league, it's night and day. You're not going to have a perfect roster, but we're pretty set. The fan base nitpicks too much. Yeah, I mean, look, Rolla, I do a show every day, bro. I talk about the Eagles every day. The majority of fans, the realistic truth about the majority of fans is you go up and down on your takes. You go up and down on who you think is going to be great and who you're not. It's not this linear thing where every single day you're like, the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl. Like, do you say that every single day of fandom? Like, I do a show every day. We're going to talk about the ups and the downs, the potential for the ups and the downs. If you wanted me to just come up here and say, we can't nitpick today, everything is good, and I could do the Stu Birds 365 in 8 minutes a day and get out of here. I'm doing a show, bro. I mean, we're going to talk about everything. Hurts, top 5 says, Hurts is the only QB in history to have 14,000 pass yards, 3,000 rush yards, and an interception percentage less than 2% in his first 5 seasons. That's crazy numbers right there. 14K. Is it 3,000 rush yards? I honestly thought it was a little bit more than that. I feel like the dude's getting so many. He's gotten a lot of rushing yards. So still impressive work from the quarterback. All right. Curtis says, Zander wants people to only speak on what they know, and he wants things that shouldn't be political to not being on the internet of all places. You're going to need a magic wand. Well, I don't want anything. I'm not trying to be the arbiter of anything. If you don't improve, you don't analyze everything to find areas to get better. There's no growth and praise. You can't compare this year's team to last year's team. We won't ever have a perfect storm again. It's true, Flyers. That's the hardest part about this year. It's not replacing the talent. It's not replacing the players. It's not any of those things. It's the magic. Everything worked last year. The complementary football, the running game, the defense, the secondary, the defensive front, everything worked and was put together, as you say, like a perfect storm, a perfect puzzle, whatever you want to call it. How do you recreate that magic? That's the hardest thing to do. All right? That's the hardest thing to do. JD3 says, is there a chance we move off Smitty before AJ? I think it's clear AJ helps our passing game more. I don't think so. I think Smitty's here to stay. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Maybe there's a world that exists that we keep both those guys longer than we think. I don't know. Like, Jordan's going to be interesting because all these defensive contracts coming up. Do we stick with the method of just continue to have turnover and continue to draft players? Like, we spent our first 5 draft selections this year on defensive players. Do you do that every year and just let the big contracts go? Now, you're not going to let Jalen Carter go. You're not going to let – obviously, they just made their mind up on Jordan Davis in a small way, not a long-term way, but a small way. Going to be interesting. Abe says, Zander, watching from APR's tape, I see a little BG in him, but he's not as polished. He's not as big, too, right? BG was kind of a stout dude, but I like APR, man. Remember, you're talking about a 6th-round pick there. So, I don't think it's crazy to say you like the upside, but I also don't think it's like, crazy to put in. Yeah, he's probably not going to be what he was in college, obviously. All right. Falcons just picked up Drake London's 5th-year option. Not that has any relevance to any of you. All right. My Makuba hype is growing. I think he is the safety you want with guys like Worthy taking the top off. I agree. But we play Worthy what? Maybe once a year, if you're lucky. Are they on the schedule next year? Let's look at the Eagles 2025 schedule. Let's look. Do you have the Chiefs next year? No, you don't. We have the Bills. Oh, no, we do have the Chiefs. We have the Chiefs away. So we're going to be in Arrowhead next year. Packers away. Detroit home next year. Bears are home. Who do you guys think is going to be the opener? Who do you think is going to be the opener? This guy says only the Chiefs can repeat. I didn't say that, DC. I think we can repeat. I think we can repeat. I think we're in a pretty good position to repeat, dude. Our whole offense is coming back. Literally the entire offense outside of the right guard. Well, and Goddard's still up in the air, but I think at this point, maybe Goddard is back. At the end of the day, he is under contract. This is a great question by Texas T. She says, realistically, how many players on both sides can a team pay and keep a healthy rookie or cheap rotation? That Texas T, if there was an answer to that, there'd be a lot more better GMs, right? It's a hard balancing act. Howie's done it very successfully the last 4 years. In fact, Howie's done it successfully longer because most GMs wouldn't have been able to transition out of a top-paid quarterback into a new top-paid quarterback and build a Super Bowl roster with both of those guys in the period of time that Howie did. So that's the balancing act. That's what makes it so hard is, a healthy rookie rotation of cheap production and paying players. That's where it's going to get confusing on not confusing, but challenging on defense. You're going to have to pay Jalen Carter. He's on a rookie contract right now. You're going to have to pay Cooper, Quinion, Nolan. Think about it. All those dudes were cheaper. Now, I do think what's going to help is Bryce Huff will be off the books after this year. Eduardo says, I'll be taking a trip to Wisconsin this year to watch the Packers game. Sills convinced me to go to Lambeau Field, seeing how it's historic to the NFL. Yeah, Eduardo, you went to the Brazil game last year, right, bro? I think I remember that correctly, right? You went to the Brazil game? That'd be cool, man. Go to Lambeau. Lambeau's definitely on my bucket list. Lambeau's definitely on my bucket list. MF has been saying Bill's going to the Super Bowl for 4 years. Now, they don't need a new quarterback. That's not what they need. By the way, I thought it was hilarious that their GM came on and shredded the talk show guy. That was pretty funny. I'm from right outside, about 10 miles out from, no, not 10 miles from the city. I'm 2 miles from the city, actually, right north off Broad Street. Abington, Jenkintown area. Went to school in the city. Been here my whole life, other than I lived in Houston for 2 years and when I lived in Tuscaloosa for college. Oh, you're going to the Tampa playoff game, the hockey game? Bombay, that series has been great. All right. The NHL playoffs have been pretty good. I haven't locked in as much as I would have liked so far. All right, I'm following that Capital series. I want to see them do well because I'm a big Ovechkin fan. I always have been an Ovechkin fan. Even when I was a little kid, I liked Ovechkin. All right. Did the Devils win? You're going to the Tampa game. So is that what? That's tonight? Oh, you'll be all right, again. So you went to the last game. You're about to lose that series, bro. You're about to lose that series game. You're down 3-1 right now. Panthers are a good team, man. Panthers are a good team. Are you a Panthers fan or a Tampa fan? Oh, no, you're talking about the game in Tampa, the Eagles game. I got you. I thought you were talking about the hockey game. This guy, Travarius, who was a hater a couple minutes ago, happy to hear I've won you over. Travarius, love you, brother. No one's better than the Eagles. If the Eagles stay relatively healthy, they're running it back. I think they've got a really good chance. I agree with that. Health is obviously a big thing. Defense is fair questions. You mean you lost some dudes? But we'll see. I'm a Panthers fan. I got you. Lightning's fans are soft. They won't let you sit in certain sections. That's all right. I'm going to lock in on the NHL playoffs a little bit more. And the NBA playoffs. Is that when's that Lakers game? Is that tonight? Lakers and Timberwolves? After Sixers. I love the Sixers, man. I hope that they do something because I really want to be a fan of them again. Today, Wolves in 5. You think so? Yeah, Shannon Sharp going out bad. Instead of Lakers in 5, it's Timberwolves in 5. When that first came out, that meme, I was legitimately saying Lakers in 5, like in my head for like 2 days straight. Lakers in 5. It's such a funny meme. They play tonight. Yeah, I'll be seeing, man. I'll be seeing what happened. History shows the Eagles don't run it back. Well, history shows no team really runs it back, Texas boy, but I think the Eagles have a pretty good chance. Even if the defense takes a step back, the offense can be better than last year as Hurts keeps growing. I agree. I think Hurts is going to have another big year this year, because I do think teams are going to kind of come into this season. People always say sophomore slump. Jaden Daniels might regress this year because the team's got the tape on him now. Well, I do think that in a similar fashion, teams are going to come into this thing saying, take away the run. But to be fair to Jalen, this is where I think Curtis, because I know sometimes you have questions on Jalen. This is where I think it's unfair to Jalen Hurts. if Jalen Hurts didn't play well last year when we needed him to play well, we would not be Super Bowl champions, Curtis. We would not be. Now, again, I know Saquon was the catalyst for much of the offense last year. I'm not disputing that. But if Jalen doesn't show up like he showed up versus Steve Spagnuolo in the Super Bowl, that's a different looking ball game. That's a completely different looking ball game. Now, again, the defense was great. There's a lot of different factors that was great, but Jalen was great when we needed him to be great. So, in my estimation, he can do that again. He can do that again. Like, I don't think you win the Super Bowl last year if Jalen was a trash can, you know? So, we'll see what happens. We'll see. I think it should be a good one. Hurts was awesome last year. He sure was, Stephen Paparo. Hey, and what were the two most important games of the year, brother? Last two. Lexicon says, Campbell's really is intriguing. I can see him rushing from the outside, but also as a late blitzer up the middle. I think the blitz is going to be huge. All right? I think the blitz is going to be huge. Or a guy who shows blitz, then bails. God, I hope he's healthy. You and me both, Lexicon. He's a special player. The question will be the health early and what type of impact. Devin says, can't wait for Philly to come to Buffalo. My whole family will be going repping the green. Yeah, I know you're out in Buffalo, Shanahan. I might have to get you something. I sent you out the hat last year. Maybe you'll rock that to the game in Buffalo. I got to do something for you, Devin. All right, everybody, I got to get out of here. I appreciate all you guys for being here. I appreciate all the likes, the comments, the shares, the pushback. It's all good. I mean, as long as you're a rational human being and we can push back, I got no issue with that. I like people who disagree. Yesterday, I tried to bring up as many people as I could that disagree with me. I think that's all fine and dandy. The problem I have is that when people make sweeping allegations about who you are, what you believe, where you stand on, what do you think of the quarter, all that. It's like, come on. I didn't say that. All right. So, but I do appreciate the pushback. I appreciate the love. Elaine, they did pick up Jordan Davis's 5th-year option. That's the latest news in Eagle Land. They did pick up the 5th-year option. All right. So he's going to be here to stay at least for the next year and for the next 2 years. So 25 and 26. And as John put it, they may be working on a longer-term contract. We'll see. But I appreciate all you guys. All right. Sig Lord, I want to thank you, man. You've been out there going to bat for me. You know, you got this 3 million view Twitter post. Everybody wants to say who and what I am. Sig Lord's out there fighting for me. Thank you, Sig Lord. I appreciate you, brother. I do appreciate you, man. All right. I'm good to stand alone. You know, one guy said, you're getting cooked. And I said, what, you think I made a take to be liked? There was another guy who says, your fan base is telling you that this is a bad take. And I'm like, what? So I'm only supposed to make takes that I have to cross-check with the people who listen to me? What's the point of that? Would you guys even like me if that's what I did? I got a take. You don't have to agree with all of them. All right? I know you are, Sig. I appreciate you, brother, man. I appreciate it. Appreciate you, Bombay. Appreciate everybody. See you next time, everybody. Great show today, and hit that like button on your way out.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.